Chapter 19:21. Boom! Two bolts of five-color divine lightning hit the gap in the mountain guarding array at the same time, causing an earth-shaking roar. There were 4 demon clan powerhouses near the gap, and they were about to enter the Shihis sect through the gap. The five-color divine lightning suddenly struck, which caught them off guard. As the dazzling lightning exploded, the magical power shields of the 4 demon clan powerhouses were instantly shattered. Their flesh and blood bodies were also shattered by the divine lightning, turning into countless charred pieces that splashed in all directions. Of course, the divine souls of the 4 demon clan powerhouses were not spared, and they collapsed under the 5-colored divine lightning. Although they were powerhouses in the 3rd or 4th level of the tribulation realm, they had survived several heavenly tribulations and could withstand the power of the divine lightning. But when had they ever seen divine lightning with 4 attributes? What's more, the 5-color divine lightning also contained the star divine fire. That was the divine power that a tribulation realm powerhouse could not withstand. The 4 demon clan powerhouses were killed on the spot, and they turned into ashes without leaving any bones behind. This sudden turn of events caused the other 8 devil race powerhouses to turn pale with shock and horror. Some of them had just rushed into the array, and some were outside the array. But they all turned their heads and looked in the direction of Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing removed the invisible state and was standing in the night sky, looking at them with a cold face. Seeing this scene, the 8 demon clan powerhouses' eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Murderous intent surged out of their bodies, and they roared with grief and indignation. Bastard! Someone actually sneak attacked us. It's a human boy. Kill him. Everyone, don't let down your guard. Let's work together to kill him. Damn reptile, I'm going to skin you and pull out your tendons. The 8 demon clan powerhouses all brandished their weapons and rushed toward Ji Tianqing without caring about their own safety. They slashed out overwhelming saber light and blood shadows. Suddenly, the dazzling saber light and sword shadows and blood flames lit up half of the night sky. Ji Tianqing's figure was also drowned by all kinds of brilliance. But he was fearless and ignored the attacks of the 8 demon clan. When all kinds of magic attacks were about to hit him, his body became almost transparent and looming. Without a doubt, this was the chaotic heaven's secret technique. He already turned into 1,000 li of heaven and earth. Bang, 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 bang. Countless saber lights and sword shadows struck him, but they were all shattered, turning into billions of specks of light that scattered in the night sky. Ji Tianqing, on the other hand, was safe and sound. He raised his palms again and shot out 2 dazzling golden lights at the 8 demon race powerhouses. Heavenly Dragon Palm. The dazzling golden light condensed into 2 10,000 feet long golden divine dragons. They let out deafening dragon roars and swooped down from the sky. The expressions of the 8 demon race cultivators changed drastically. Their eyes were filled with horror as they hurriedly dodged in all directions. Boom! Boom! The 2 golden dragons crashed down and struck the 2 devils on the spot, causing deafening booms to erupt. The 2 devils who were hit were unable to resist at all. Their bodies immediately disintegrated. Their souls flew out and floated in the night sky unconsciously. Upon closer inspection, one would discover that the surface of the 2 balls of dark purple light was covered with cracks. Although they were not dead, their souls were severely injured and they had already fallen into a coma. Before the other demon race cultivators could save them, Ji Tianqing struck out 2 thunderbolts with his palms and struck the 2 balls of purple light. Kaboom! The 2 balls of purple light shattered on the spot and scattered in the night sky. At this point, half of the 12 demon race powerhouses had been killed and only 6 were left. The 6 demon race cultivators were still in shock. They scattered in the night sky and surrounded Ji Tianqing. Although they had the advantage in numbers, they stared at Ji Tianqing cautiously and did not dare to act rashly. The 2 sides were in a standoff. Ji Tianqing took the opportunity to look at the peak of the mountain to check on the situation of the West River sect. The crimson-robed elder had already rushed into the West River sect and was on a killing spree. The square with a radius of 10 miles had become a bloody battlefield. Hundreds of West River sect guards, disciples, and deacons were attacking the crimson-robed elder with all their might. However, the crimson-robed elder was extremely powerful. He had already reached the martial sage realm and was in an invincible position. No matter how the West River sect people attacked him, he was safe and sound. On the other hand, he could kill many guards and disciples with a flick of his finger. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing frowned and revealed a dignified expression. He is indeed a martial sage elite. I wonder which demon sage is he. Seeing the crimson-robed elder killing the West River sect disciples wantonly, Su Mo was anxious and his body surged with violent killing intent. However, if he wanted to stop the crimson-robed elder, he had to first deal with the 6 demon race cultivators in front of him. At this moment, the 6 demon race cultivators had already arranged themselves into a battle formation. With the help of the demon race's secret skill, they launched an attack together. Demon Sky 6 Dao. The 6 demon race cultivators stood in different positions and waved their swords and sabers at the same time. 36 purple light, demonic blades descended from the sky. The 36 demonic blades lit up the night sky and formed a special pattern that contained great power and mystery. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing's eyes flashed with a cold light. Breaking Sun Sword. He raised his palms and formed a sword art with both hands. In an instant, 12 golden light swords were released and stabbed at the 6 demon race cultivators. Bam! 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 The 36 purple light demonic blades slashed at him. However, his body was transparent and merged with the heaven and earth. In the blink of an eye, the power of the demonic blades was neutralized and he was unharmed. The 12 golden light swords penetrated the blockade of the purple light demonic blades and stabbed the 6 demon race cultivators. The 6 demon race cultivators were sent flying. The bloodlight shield and armor were destroyed, and dark purple demon race blood splattered all over their bodies. Ji Tianqing sent the 6 demon race cultivators flying with one move and severely injured them. He took the opportunity to use his ultimate move to kill them all. Soul-slaying sword. He roared angrily. Golden light surged from his body and erupted with earth-shaking power. The golden primordial spirit golden sword flew out from the top of his head and into the night sky. It became a giant sword that was thousands of feet tall. Under his control, the giant sword slashed through the night sky and slashed at a demon race cultivator. Bang! The demon race cultivator couldn't dodge in time and was immediately slashed in half by the giant sword. He let out a heart-wrenching scream. The primordial spirit golden sword slashed again. The demon race cultivator's soul was also shattered, and he died on the spot. The other 5 demon race cultivators were scared out of their wits. They rushed into the protective mountain array desperately and begged for the protection of the blood-robed elder. However, Ji Tianqing knew what the enemy was going to do. He had already controlled the primordial spirit golden sword to block the gap in the protective mountain array. Die! He roared with killing intent and controlled the primordial spirit golden sword to slash again and again. Soon, he killed another 3 demon race cultivators. There were only 2 demon race cultivators left. Seeing that they couldn't escape into the protective mountain array, they could only turn around and run. They couldn't care less about the mission or the presence of the blood-robed elder. Running for their lives was more important. Ji Tianqing immediately chased after them. He controlled the primordial spirit golden sword to chase after them. At the same time, the blood-robed elder killed all the disciples and deacons on the square and destroyed half of the West River sect. Chapter 1922. Swoosh! Ji Tianqing sped through the night sky as fast as lightning. 10 miles in front of him, a demon in a black robe was running for his life. Slash! Ji Tianqing let out a furious roar as he controlled the 1,000-feet-long golden sword to slash at the demon. The primordial spirit golden sword cut through the night sky like a beam of golden light and struck down like a thunderbolt. Bam! With a dull explosion, the demon was hit by the primordial spirit golden sword. His body exploded into pieces, and demon blood splattered everywhere. Another demon expert died under Ji Tianxing's sword. The only remaining demon expert was scared out of his wits. He used a forbidden secret skill and turned into a beam of bloodlight to escape. But at this moment, the blood-robed elder had caught up with Ji Tianxing. They were 1,000 feet apart. "Little bastard, you deserve to die." The blood-robed old man let out a tiger-like roar as he waved his sleeves and shot out 2 blood-red streams of light. Like 2 waterfalls, they tore through the night sky and fiercely blasted towards Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing sensed that something was wrong and turned to face the enemy. "Dharma body of heaven and earth." He roared and used the ultimate skill of the Dharma body of heaven and earth. His body became transparent and blurry and merged with the heaven and earth. But even so, the 2 streaks of blood-red light still hid him, causing 2 muffled booms to ring out. Bam! Bam! Ji Tianxing's body flashed with golden light and changed dozens of times. At the same time, the ground within a radius of 200 miles silently caved in. The 2 nearby mountains also collapsed soundlessly, turning into endless dust that scattered on the ground. Obviously, the power of the blood-robed elder's beams of blood-red light had been absorbed by the heaven and earth. Such a strange scene stunned the blood-robed elder. His eyes widened in disbelief. Seizing this opportunity, Ji Tianxing decisively launched a counterattack. 5-colored divine thunder. He suddenly waved his palms and shot out 2 colorful lightning pillars toward the blood-robed elder. The 2 thunderbolts were dozens of feet long, and they contained 4 different attributes of thunderbolts and the star divine fire. Their power was extremely shocking. The crimson-robed old man immediately reacted, and his figure flashed 1,000 feet to the side, dodging a pillar of lightning. However, the other 5-color divine lightning still struck him, causing a deafening explosion. Boom! The 5-color divine lightning exploded. The violent lightning and divine fire of the stars wrapped around the blood-robed elder's body. He was an overlord of the Devil Dao and had mastered hundreds of secret techniques of the Devil Dao. He had the power and divine abilities to destroy the heavens and earth. He was almost immortal. But even so, he was still afraid of the extreme yang lightning and the peerlessly terrifying star divine flames. Crackle, crackle. A series of thunderous booms rang out, and the blood-robed old man's body trembled violently. However, after a few breaths, he circulated his energy to disperse the lightning and used the black mist to extinguish the star divine fire. Soon, he returned to normal. A layer of hazy bloody light flashed across his body, and the charred wounds on his body quickly healed. He stood in the night sky, staring at Ji Tianxing, and his body was surrounded by a towering, killing intent. "Kid, I have underestimated you. I didn't expect you to control 4 types of thunderbolts and the star divine fire." The blood-robed old man was indeed frightened. He looked at Ji Tianxing with a tinge of fear in his eyes. After all, thunderbolts were extremely effective against the Devil Dao, and so was the star divine fire. Fortunately, he was a devil saint, an old monster who had cultivated for 2,000 years and mastered the powerful Xianing secret technique. That was how he managed to survive. If it were any other Devil Dao expert, he would have been killed by the thunderbolts on the spot. Ji Tianxing looked at the blood-robed old man indifferently and asked coldly, "Old man, which one of the 4 great devils are you?" "Which one?" The blood-robed old man frowned and sneered eerily. "Ha ha. I thought you were quite capable and knowledgeable. I didn't expect you to not even know my name. You are so ignorant that it's laughable. Listen carefully. I am the 4th devil saint, Patriarch Xue Pao." At this point, Patriarch Xue Pao's cloak disappeared into thin air, revealing a wizened and coarse old face that looked like tree bark. On his dark and skinny old face, there was a wide, blood-red mouth and a pair of scarlet eyes that were as red as fire. His long, dark purple hair, surrounded by a mysterious purple flame, fell curly over his shoulders. A brutal, bloodthirsty, and domineering aura burst out from his body and spread in all directions. He stared at Ji Tianxing arrogantly and shouted in a deep voice, "Little bastard, the biggest mistake you have made in your life is not showing up tonight. Tell me your name. I don't kill nameless people." Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and stared at him with a playful look. The corner of his mouth curled into a mocking sneer. "Do you really want to know my name? Ha! Are you afraid?" Patriarch Shui Pao sneered. "Coward, you don't even dare to tell me your name. I don't want to dirty my hands by killing you." Ji Tianxing sneered. "Then listen carefully. My surname is Ji, and my name is the God Fiend's father. How can there be such a long name? The God Fiend's." Patriarch Shui Pao listened carefully and mumbled to himself in confusion. He only realized it halfway through and flew into a rage. "Little bastard, you must be tired of living." Ji Tianxing was not in a hurry and was happy to stall for time. He continued, "Patriarch Shui Pao, you are one of the 4 great devils and the ancestor God Fiend's lackey. You could be considered a big shot in the diabolism. However, you don't know who the ancestor God Fiend's nemesis is. I am standing right in front of you, and you don't even know who I am. You must be blind." Patriarch Shui Pao was scolded badly. He was so angry that he trembled and stared at Ji Tianxing with fire in his eyes. However, he suppressed his anger in the end. He could tell that Ji Tianxing was implying something. "The ancestor God Fiend's nemesis? Your surname is Ji." Patriarch Shui Pao's eyes widened, but his pupils gradually narrowed. He stared at Ji Tianxing with a sharp gaze. Patriarch Shui Pao's heart throbbed. He trembled all over and clenched his fists tightly. "You are Ji Tianxing? You are that damned Ji Tianxing. No wonder you look so similar to the portrait. You have such powerful skills at such a young age." Patriarch Shui Pao finally guessed Ji Tianxing's identity. He was so excited that he burst into laughter. "Ha ha! I have searched high and low for you, only to find you by sheer luck. I came all the way to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and massacred 5 cities. I killed hundreds of thousands of insects just to lure you out. I didn't expect you to walk right into my trap before I even went to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains to look for you. You damned little bastard, you really have a death wish. Ha ha." After confirming Ji Tianxing's identity, Patriarch Shui Pao came to a realization. He no longer concealed it and revealed the truth without hesitation to express the excitement in his heart. Chapter 1923. Patriarch Shui Pao laughed arrogantly. Ji Tianxing looked at him calmly. His eyes were cold and indifferent. Patriarch Shui Pao was confident that he would win. He looked at him as if he was looking at a dead man. Ji Tianxing was the same. He looked at Patriarch Shui Pao as if he was looking at a corpse. In his eyes, Patriarch Shui Pao would definitely die. "When you're done laughing, I'll send you on your way," Ji Tianxing said as he used a secret technique to attack Patriarch Shui Pao. White Tiger, Sacred Sword. Golden fire surged out of his body and quickly merged with the primordial spirit Golden Sword, making the Golden Sword even more dazzling. Swoosh! The giant Golden Sword, which was thousands of feet tall, slashed at Patriarch Shui Pao with the fierce golden fire and the shadow of a huge white tiger. Before the sword arrived, the invisible sword intent had locked onto Patriarch Shui Pao, making it impossible for him to escape. A mighty force that seemed to suppress the world came from all directions and enveloped Patriarch Shui Pao. It was as if he was in a quagmire. He struggled, but could not break free. He could only watch as the golden sword slashed at his head. At this critical moment, his wild laughter came to an abrupt stop. He quickly counterattacked. 2 balls of bloody fire lit up in his palms, and 2 white bone hammers appeared out of thin air. The 2 hammers were 3 feet long and made of unknown white bone. They had a sinister aura and exuded a bloody aura. This was the weapon that made Patriarch Shui Pao famous. It was a saint-level demonic Dharma treasure, the Blood River Hammers. It was said that the 2 Blood River Hammers were not made by Patriarch Shui Pao, but originated from ancient times. The ancient war of gods 30,000 years ago caused the gods to fall. The world was covered in blood, and hundreds of races were wiped out. Many demonic gods slaughtered hundreds of millions of lives, causing rivers of blood to flow on the ground. Mountains of white bones were everywhere. After hundreds of years, the rivers of blood and the mountains of white bones gradually disappeared. The resentment of hundreds of millions of lives also gradually dissipated. In a sinkhole where hundreds of millions of corpses were buried, a pair of sparkling, jade-like hammers appeared. This pair of dazzling, white jade war hammers were, in fact, formed naturally from thousands of corpses and rivers of blood. They were naturally saint-grade demonic artifacts. When the Blood River Warhammer concealed its aura, it looked harmless, like a magic treasure of the Shinmen sect. However, when living beings and martial artists approached it, it would silently kill them. Their souls and flesh would also be absorbed by it and turn into a pile of bones. Only demons who had reached the Saint Realm could wield this pair of hammers. Over the course of tens of thousands of years, this pair of Bloody River Warhammers have been tossed around the Shenwu continent, falling into the hands of countless powerhouses. It was not until 800 years ago that Patriarch Shui Pao obtained this pair of hammers. However, since then, his skills had improved by leaps and bounds. He relied on the Blood River Warhammers to defeat countless powerful enemies and slaughter millions of living beings. Blood River of 10,000 Li. Patriarch Shui Pao's voice was as loud as a bell. His body and his war hammer expanded violently, turning into a giant that was hundreds of meters tall. He brandished his pair of Blood River war hammers, filling the sky with bloody light as they ruthlessly smashed towards the White Tiger's sacred sword. Boom! The giant golden sword and the white bone war hammer collided fiercely, producing an earth-shattering sound that reverberated fiercely in the night sky. At that moment, golden light splashed in all directions, and bloody light swirled in the air. Violent shock waves spread out like ripples, sweeping across the night sky for hundreds of kilometers. The 1,000-meter-tall, primordial spirit golden sword crumbled on the spot, turning into millions of golden fragments that scattered in the night sky. A 1-meter-long golden sword flew out, exploding with golden light before falling powerlessly. Ji Tianqing's figure was also thrown out of the golden fragments and fell to the ground. His face was deathly pale, and blood seeped out of the corner of his mouth. His aura was somewhat chaotic, and his consciousness was somewhat blurry. After all, he had fused with the primordial spirit golden sword and clashed head-on with the Blood River Warhammer. Although his strength was comparable to a half-step martial saint, the Blood River Warhammer was a saint-grade treasure, and Patriarch Shui Pao was also a martial saint powerhouse. There was still a huge gap between a half-step martial saint and a true martial saint. Thus, he had been injured by the Blood River Warhammer. His internal organs had been severely damaged, and his consciousness had sunk into a state of dizziness. In comparison, Patriarch Shui Pao's fate was much better. He had also been sent flying by the violent force, and his pair of Blood River Warhammers flashed with bloody light. However, he had only suffered some superficial injuries, and his aura was somewhat chaotic. After he had retreated for 5 kilometers, he immediately stabilized himself and swung the Blood River Warhammer toward Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing, your time of death has come. As long as I kill you, I will receive the recognition and inheritance of Lord Demon God, and I will have a chance to reach the divine realm. For the sake of my path to becoming a divine realm, you will die obediently. Patriarch Shui Pao roared with a ferocious face, and his whole body burst out with a murderous intent. He held the Blood River Warhammer and smashed it toward Ji Tianqing. At this time, Ji Tianqing had just recovered from the dizziness. The 1-meter-long primordial spirit golden sword had also condensed into the size of an embroidery needle and drilled back into his head. Just as he was about to fly back into the night sky, he saw Patriarch Shui Pao pouncing toward him. 2 huge white bone warhammers burst out dazzling bloody light and smashed down with a destructive force. An invisible force tightly wrapped around Ji Tianqing like a cocoon, and no matter how hard he struggled, he could not break free. He was about to be hit by the Blood River War Hammer, and even if he did not die, he would be seriously injured. However, at this critical moment, something unexpected happened. In the night sky 100 miles to the east, an angry roar that could pierce gold and crack stone suddenly rang out. "Demon, you are courting death." As the angry roar sounded, 6 dazzling golden lights appeared in the night sky and stabbed toward Patriarch Schwepao. Those were 6 dazzling golden sword lights, like lightning tearing the night sky apart, like meteors streaking across the sky. The sword lights were dazzling and powerful. Patriarch Schwepao glanced sideways and saw that the 6 sword lights were still 100 kilometers away, so he ignored them. He thought that the sword lights would only arrive when he smashed Ji Tianqing to death with his 2 hammers. At that time, he would have enough time to dodge the sword lights. However, what happened next was completely out of his expectation. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The 6 golden sword lights strangely disappeared in the night sky, crossed the night sky, and appeared behind Patriarch Schwepao. Before the Blood River Warhammer could hit Ji Tianqing, the 6 sword lights stabbed Patriarch Schwepao. Bang, 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 bang. A series of muffled sounds burst out, and the golden light bloomed, illuminating the night sky. Patriarch Schwepao's 300-meter-tall body was pierced by the 6 sword lights, and his demonic blood splattered everywhere. The violent impact blasted him away, and the pair of Blood River warhammers flew out his hands. The heart-wrenching pain made him twitch all over, and his face twisted. However, in his heart, he was even more shocked. He simply didn't dare believe that his sword technique was actually capable of heavily injuring him from a few hundred kilometers away. At the same time, a big hole suddenly appeared in the night sky near Ji Tianqing. Swoosh! A dazzling golden light lit up and flew out of the hole, landing beside Ji Tianqing. Chapter 1924. This white-haired old man with white eyebrows was wearing a yellow Taoist robe and holding a golden horsetail whisk. His body was tall, his face was majestic, and his whole body was exuding a majestic aura. In front of him, Patriarch Schwepao looked even more repulsive, and his aura was gloomy and violent. Without a doubt, this yellow-robed Taoist was Huanglong. "Master, this disciple came late to save you. Please forgive me." Huanglong Taoist landed beside Ji Tianqing and looked at his injuries with concern. He hurriedly bowed and apologized. Ji Tianqing had already adjusted his qi circulation and smoothed out the turbulent mana. He turned his head to look at Huanglong Taoist, and a gratified smile appeared on his face. He nodded and said, "I didn't expect you to come so quickly." It had only been an hour since he had sent out the Jade Slip. Huanglong Taoist had crossed more than 30,000 miles in such a short time and arrived at the Shiha sect in time. This was simply godly speed. Huanglong Taoist was praised, but he was not happy at all. He said with a little shame, "I've let you down, Master. I broke the void when I received the message. I was almost late. You're not late." Ji Tianqing smiled and shook his head. He commented, "It seems that your heart sutra of sword control has been cultivated to perfection. Breaking the void, concealing the sword in the void, and divine 16 swords are not a problem." "Yes." Huanglong Taoist nodded and looked coldly at Patriarch Schwepao. He said in a deep voice, "Master, please help me. I'll take care of this demon." Huanglong Taoist saw that Ji Tianqing was injured and obviously wanted him to take the opportunity to heal. However, in order to save face for his master, he would not say it out loud, so he changed his words. Ji Tianqing smiled and nodded. He warned, "This demon is Patriarch Schwepao, the last of the 4 demonic saints. Be careful of the Blood River Hammer in his hand." Huanglong Taoist cupped his hands to show that he understood and flew toward Schwepao Ancestor with the horsetail whisk. "Schwepao Ancestor, you damned old bastard. How dare you come to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains to cause trouble again? You were lucky that my sword didn't cut off your claws last time. You won't be so lucky tonight." Huanglong Taoist's white hair fluttered in the wind as he shouted in a deep voice. Hearing his words, Ji Tianxing finally understood that the demon clan experts who attacked the Pillar of Heaven's mountains half a year ago were led by ancestor Shui Pao. Of course, Patriarch Shui Pao knew Huanglong Taoist. He stared at him coldly and sneered. "Old Taoist Huanglong, I'll never forget what you did to me. Back then, it was at the Pillar of Heaven's mountains that I was struck by your sword because you had the geographical advantage. But tonight, don't even think about hurting a single hair on this old man's head. And this place will be your burial ground." Huanglong Taoist stroked his beard and sneered disdainfully. "You a low-level devil? How dare you talk back to me? I was just about to take revenge on you. Since you've delivered yourself to me, I'll grant you your wish." As soon as he finished speaking, Huanglong Taoist made a spell with his left hand and shook the golden horsetail whisk in his right hand. Then, golden light scattered all over the sky. Flowing light phantom. The dark golden horsetail whisk was made up of thousands of golden threads. After it spread out, it burst into golden light like fireworks. Thousands of golden thread-like golden light scattered and quickly condensed into hundreds of sword radiances. They pierced toward Patriarch Shui Pao like a rain of arrows. Just in time, Patriarch Shui Pao didn't retreat. Instead, he laughed wildly and waved a pair of white bone war hammers to smash the sword radiances in the sky. Blood Dragon Sky. Two dazzling blood radiances burst out from the two white bone war hammers and condensed into two blood dragons that were thousands of feet long. They rushed toward Huanglong Taoist. Bang, 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 bang. Hundreds of golden sword radiances collided with the two blood dragons. A series of loud noises echoed in the night sky. The sword radiances were shattered, and the two blood dragons collapsed on the spot. They turned into blood radiances and scattered in the night sky. The two sides were evenly matched in the first exchange of blows. Neither side had the upper hand. However, Huanglong Taoist had a backup plan. He waved his horsetail whisk again and made a mysterious spell seal. There was no dazzling golden light or sword radiance. However, the night sky within 100 miles seemed to be frozen. It was completely still. In the next moment, more than a dozen rays of light suddenly lit up in the pitch-black sky and fell down like meteors. The 16 golden lights came so fast that they landed on top of Patriarch Shui Pao's head in the blink of an eye. Only then did he see clearly that they were 16 giant golden swords that were thousands of feet long. Each of the giant swords was majestic and exuded a domineering aura. They seemed to represent the righteousness of heaven and earth and the brilliance of the sun and the moon. The 16 giant swords attacked at the same time. It was as if heaven and earth were punishing him, and the gods were unleashing their wrath. Patriarch Shui Pao's expression changed. He said in a low voice, "Damn old Taoist. It's the hidden sword void again." At the critical moment, he quickly activated a piece of shell on his chest. It lit up with a dazzling purple light. It was a black and purple turtle shell. It was covered with ancient patterns and strange demonic patterns. This was Patriarch Shui Pao's protective magic treasure. It was also a sacred weapon. It was said that in ancient times, there was a black tortoise. It fought against the ancient demon gods to protect its people. In the end, several ancient demon gods worked together to kill the black tortoise. They blasted it into pieces and slaughtered millions of people. Only this broken shell was preserved. However, it was also contaminated by endless demonic aura. It was nurtured in the blood of the people for hundreds of years and turned into an evil demonic creature. Thousands of years ago, a demon ancestor obtained this shell. He gathered the power of 3 great demon saints and refined it into a magic treasure of the demon Tao. He named it the Black Tortoise Demonic Disc. After a few generations, this black tortoise demonic disc was obtained by Patriarch Shui Pao. It became one of his most precious magic treasures. Black tortoise returns to heaven. Celestial demon 9 esoteric spells. Slaughter the people and create an endless sea of blood. Patriarch Shui Pao roared loudly. He used all his strength to activate the black tortoise demonic disc. It turned into a black and purple wall above his head. Bang! 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 16 golden swords slammed down, and 12 of them hit the black tortoise demonic disc, causing a loud explosion. However, Huanglong Daoist waved his horsetail whisk and controlled 4 of the golden swords. They changed their attack trajectory and hit Patriarch Shui Pao from the side. Bang! 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 Patriarch Shui Pao was sent flying by the giant swords. Blood splattered all over his body. Damn you, old bastard! You are dead meat. Patriarch Shui Pao cursed angrily. He controlled the black tortoise demonic disc to protect himself and swung the white bone warhammer at Huanglong Daoist. Huanglong Daoist stood in the night sky with a murderous look. He kept waving his horsetail whisk and casting spells. He controlled the 16 giant swords with his divine thought. Under his control, the 16 giant swords of Kenshin appeared and disappeared. They disappeared and appeared behind Patriarch Shui Pao from time to time, silently attacking him. Whoosh! 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 The dazzling golden light illuminated the night sky, making the ruins as bright as day. Chapter 1925. Huanglong Daoist and Patriarch Shui Pao fought fiercely in the night sky. Their fight was so intense that it was earth-shattering. After 100 breaths of time, the two of them had exchanged more than 100 moves, but there was still no clear winner. However, Huanglong Daoist was not injured at all. Patriarch Shui Pao, on the other hand, had more than 10 bloody holes and wounds on his body. Ji Tianxing had been watching from afar and secretly treating his injuries. After observing for 100 breaths of time, he had already known that Huanglong Daoist's strength was slightly better than Patriarch Shui Pao's. Especially, Huanglong Daoist had cultivated the Heart Sutra of swordsmanship to a higher level after receiving his guidance. He could already control 16 swords. This had doubled Huanglong Daoist's combat strength. If Patriarch Shui Pao did not have the black tortoise demonic plate and the white bone warhammer, Huanglong Daoist would have cut him into pieces with his swordsmanship. Of course, Huanglong Daoist had gained the upper hand and was suppressing Patriarch Shui Pao. Patriarch Shui Pao was forced to retreat. His face was filled with grief and indignation. He cursed angrily. "Old Taoist Huanglong, you damn old man. How could you improve your swordsmanship in such a short time?" He remembered clearly that when they attacked Tianzhu Mountain half a year ago, Huanglong Daoist could only control 9 swords. Now, Huanglong Daoist could control 16 swords, and his combat strength had greatly improved. This level of change and improvement was extremely rare for a martial saint expert. Huanglong Daoist laughed proudly and said, "Blood demon, are you afraid now? Don't you think it's too late? I said just now that I will definitely kill you here tonight. Come, have a taste of my void 1,000 swords kill." As he spoke, Huanglong Daoist put his horsetail whisk behind his back. His hands were pinched with a sword spell, and he danced in the night sky. He used the 10,000 creations void steps and performed a mysterious sword spell with both hands, controlling the power of heaven and earth within a few hundred miles. Instantly, the surrounding 200 miles of space was sealed, as if everything was frozen. In the night sky in all directions, dense 5-colored light spots suddenly lit up. There was a dazzling golden light, a mysterious white light, a blazing fire, and a deep blue light. Stepping on the stars, worshipping the stars with my sword, guiding the stars to the moon, I am Wan Xiang. 10,000 swords of the void kill. Huanglong Daoist roared and waved his right hand fiercely. The 5-colored light spots in all directions suddenly condensed into tens of thousands of 5-colored sword lights. They shot out from the void and pierced toward Patriarch Shui Pao. Swish! Swish! Instantly, the area within a radius of 200 miles turned into a world of 5-colored sword light. Each of the sword lights was hundreds of meters long. They were extremely powerful and mysterious. Tens of thousands of sword lights crisscrossed, forming a sword net that blotted out the sky. Ancestor Shui Pao's figure was immediately submerged. Patriarch Shwe Pao had nowhere to run or hide. He could only rely on the protection of the black tortoise demonic disc and the mana shield. At the same time, he waved the white bone war hammer crazily, striking out a bloody light that blotted out the sky to meet the sword lights. Bang! 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 The deafening sound of collision and the dull sound of explosion kept exploding in the night sky. Patriarch Shwe Pao's furious counterattack shattered countless sword lights. However, after those shattered sword lights dissipated, new sword lights would appear in the night sky. He could block 80 to 90% of the sword lights, but it was inevitable that he would be pierced by a small number of sword lights. The mana shield kept shattering, and the black tortoise demonic disc could not protect him from all sides. In the blink of an eye, he was pierced by the sword lights and was bleeding all over. He screamed in agony. Ah! Ah! The more agony Patriarch Shwe Pao screamed, the more excited Huanglong Daoist was. He used all his strength to control the sword formation and swore to cut Patriarch Shwe Pao into pieces. However, Ji Tianxing was watching the battle not far away. He nodded with a gratified look and shook his head with a regretful expression. The Stellar Sword Codex that I left behind includes the Sword-Wielding Heart Sutra, the Demigods and Dragons, and a universal sword formation. Huanglong did not disappoint me. He actually combined the sword-wielding technique and the universal sword formation to create the Void Thousand Sword Kill. It's a pity that the essence of this secret skill is still a sword formation. It can't merge with heaven and earth, so it's still a level lower. If Huanglong can use the sword formation to gather the power of heaven and earth within 1,000 miles, he can easily kill a martial sage expert. Ji Tianxing pondered silently as countless ideas flashed through his mind. After a short while, an idea flashed through his mind, and he immediately had an idea. Therefore, he sent a voice transmission to Huanglong Daoist and said, "Huanglong, you can improve the Void Thousand Sword Kill." Hearing this, Huanglong Daoist's eyes widened in anticipation. "Master, please teach me. Watch carefully." Ji Tianxing shouted and immediately performed the Armillary Sphere secret skill to merge himself with heaven and earth within 1,000 miles. Swoosh! His body turned transparent and completely disappeared into heaven and earth within 1,000 miles. In the next moment, he gathered the power of heaven and earth within 1,000 miles to form a majestic divine power and infused it into the universal sword formation. Instantly, Huanglong Daoist's body shook and his eyes were filled with shock. The power of the tens of thousands of light swords in the night sky increased by 2 times, and their light became even more dazzling. "Huanglong, remember this move." Ji Tianxing's voice resounded in the sky. The voice came from all directions, as if heaven and earth were speaking. No one could figure out the source. Immediately after, the tens of thousands of light swords in the sky gathered together and formed 81 huge swords. Each huge sword was thousands of feet long. They were like the swords of a deity. They were sacred and dazzling and could destroy heaven and earth. Slash! Along with a furious roar, the 81 divine swords slashed toward Ancestor Shwe Pao from all directions. Ancestor Shwe Pao's face immediately turned extremely ugly, revealing a look of horror. The terrifying power of the divine swords made him feel the aura of death. He wanted to teleport away, but the heaven and earth within 1,000 miles were sealed and suppressed. He could not move. He even had an illusion that it was not the 81 divine swords that were going to kill him, but the entire heaven and earth. At the moment of life and death, he could only hide under the black tortoise demonic plate and use the white bone warhammers to block in front of him. Boom! 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 The 81 divine swords hit Ancestor Shwe Pao hard and drowned his body. A loud explosion that shook the 9 heavens erupted and spread for thousands of miles, causing the night sky to ripple. The surrounding 300 miles of mountains and rivers silently collapsed, turning into a boundless wasteland. The black tortoise demonic plate was blown away, and its light dimmed as it fell dozens of miles away. The two white bone war hammers flew into the sky and were hit by the violent airwaves. They flew to the ground in the distance. As for ancestor Shue Pao, he was blown away with blood all over his body. His body was full of holes and cracks. His body was almost destroyed. He was severely injured, and his divine soul was in a daze. He fell to the ground with the airwaves. Chapter 1926. Huanglong Taoist widened his eyes in disbelief. He was incomparably excited, filled with shock and admiration. He had thought that with Ji Tianxing's guidance, he would be able to defeat Patriarch Shue Pao with his sword-wielding sutra. However, Patriarch Shue Pao had two divine artifacts to protect him and was proficient in many diabolical secret techniques. He had fought with Patriarch Shue Pao for more than 100 moves and had only managed to injure him slightly. If they had continued fighting, it would have been a long time before they could have won. However, Ji Tianxing had improved his Void Thousand Sword kill and defeated Patriarch Shue Pao with just one move. He was severely injured and unconscious. This was something that he could not have imagined. If he had not seen it with his own eyes, he would not have believed that the Void Thousand Sword kill that he had created could be so powerful. Oh my God, Master's attack is indeed earth-shattering. I understand now. As long as I merge the Void Thousand Sword kill with heaven and earth, I can reach a higher level with the help of heaven and earth's divine power. Master is indeed a godly person. His words are better than my 1,000 years of cultivation. It was not that Huanglong Taoist did not work hard on his cultivation, nor was it that his comprehension was too poor. It was not that he was not good at swordsmanship. It was that his direction was wrong and he was not comprehensive enough. However, Ji Tianxing had explained everything to him and verified the results with his actions. This was more effective than his 1,000 years of cultivation. Just as Huanglong Taoist was exclaiming in excitement, Ji Tianxing had revealed himself. Swoosh! He appeared beside Patriarch Shue Pao and raised his left arm. A dazzling golden light shone from his palm. God-slaying spear. His expression was cold as he shouted angrily. He waved his hand and unleashed a torrential golden divine flame. The mysterious golden divine fire immediately formed a golden divine spear that was more than 100 feet long and pierced towards Patriarch Shue Pao's head. The spear was going to smash Patriarch Shue Pao's head and destroy his divine soul. Patriarch Shue Pao was still dizzy, and his divine soul was not awake yet. He could not dodge the attack. He was about to be killed on the spot. However, his black tortoise demonic disc was a sacred artifact that had been refined by him for hundreds of years. In the nick of time, the black tortoise demonic disc flew back and stood in front of Patriarch Shue Pao. Boom! The golden divine spear collided with the black tortoise demonic disc, and a thunderous boom erupted. Instantly, the black tortoise demonic disc cracked and shattered into several pieces with a cracking sound. The golden divine spear also exploded into a huge ball of golden divine fire, rising into the air like a mushroom cloud. Patriarch Shue Pao had just dodged the attack of the golden divine spear, but he was engulfed by the golden divine fire. In an instant, his body was burned to ashes, scattering a large amount of black ash. When he crashed into the ruins, there was no flesh on his body. Only a pitch-black skeleton was left. Patriarch Shue Pao's body was destroyed just like that. The pain of being burned by the fire stimulated his mind. He was already scared out of his wits, and his fighting spirit had completely disappeared. After landing on the ground, he did not dare to stay any longer. Without hesitation, he used a forbidden secret technique and turned into a streak of crimson light to escape into the ground. Swoosh! In a flash of light, Patriarch Shue Pao went through the ground and teleported 30 miles away. In the next moment, he teleported again and escaped dozens of miles away. When Ji Tianxing started to chase after him, he was already 100 miles away. Ji Tianxing also teleported and chased after him with all his might. He swore to kill Patriarch Shue Pao once and for all. However, Patriarch Shue Pao was a martial sage expert after all. Even if he was severely injured, a martial sage expert could not be underestimated. Ji Tianxing chased after Patriarch Shuepao for 800 miles, but he still could not catch up with him. Instead, he completely lost track of him, and Patriarch Shuepao escaped. Helplessly, he could only give up the chase and curse with a heart full of unwillingness. Damn bastard, when I become a martial sage again, you will definitely die. As soon as he finished speaking, Huanglong Daoist flew over and landed beside him. Master, did Patriarch Shuepao escape? Are you injured? Huanglong Daoist looked at Ji Tianxing with concern and then looked at the night sky in front of him. Ji Tianxing waved his hand and said in a low voice, "Forget it. There is no need to chase after him. He has already escaped. After all, he is a demon sage who has cultivated for 2,000 years and has mastered the blood escape secret skill of the demon clan. Neither you nor I can catch up with him. However, his Dharma body was destroyed by us tonight, and he was forced to use the forbidden secret skill. He must be severely injured. He will not be able to recover to his peak state for at least a few decades." Hearing this, Huanglong Daoist heaved a sigh of relief. His gloomy mood became much better. That is good. At least for a few decades, Patriarch Shuepao will not be able to cause trouble. We have one less strong enemy, and the pressure on us will be greatly reduced. Ji Tianxing shook his head with a serious expression. That is not necessarily the case. If the ancestral demonic god completely abandons him and refines him into a demonic puppet, he might be able to recover his strength quickly. Huanglong Daoist frowned and asked with some doubt, Patriarch Shuepao is one of the 4 demon sages. How could the ancestral demonic god be willing to sacrifice him? If he is refined into a puppet, he will lose his demonic foundation, and there will be no possibility of him breaking through. Ji Tianxing calmly replied, "You do not understand the ancestral demonic god. It is the most savage of the demonic gods, and it will not show any mercy, even to its own subordinates and descendants. As long as it can maintain the power of the demon clan, what is the point of sacrificing a demon sage's future? What lacks the most right now is time. If it waits for a few more decades and recovers to the demonic god realm, at that time, it will not need any help and will be able to kill all the living beings on the continent by itself." Huanglong Daoist was secretly speechless when he heard this, and his heart was filled with dread. "Master, does this mean that if you cannot recover to the deity realm before it does, then the entire Shenwu continent will be finished?" Ji Tianxing nodded without saying a word. The atmosphere was somewhat stifling, and Huanglong Daoist hurriedly changed the topic. "Master, how is the situation with the Western River sect? Shall we go and take a look?" Ji Tianxing nodded and led him back to the Western River sect. Half an hour later, the two arrived at the Western River sect and landed on the mountain peak. As far as the eye could see, the entire mountain peak was in chaos. The plaza in the middle had been completely destroyed, and it had been reduced to a deep pit. Blood and corpses were scattered everywhere. The surrounding palaces and residences were also in shambles, and only a few pieces of broken fences and broken walls were left. Flames and thick smoke were still rising from them. The few dozen disciples, attendants, and guards who had survived were all injured. Everyone had terrified expressions on their faces, and some were hiding in the dark to treat their injuries, while others were busy saving people and putting out the fire. After this calamity, the Western River sect's vitality had been greatly damaged. More than half of its disciples and core strength had been killed, and it was unknown how long it would take for them to recover. Ji Tianxing and Huanglong Daoist worked together to cast a spell to help the Western River sect repair their protective array and fill in the ravines and deep pits on the mountain peak. Chapter 1927. The Shia sect was one of the 9 sects and 18 factions. Moreover, it was only a small sect that was ranked at the bottom. Even though the Western River sect had suffered heavy losses, Ji Tianxing could only sympathize with them and give them appropriate help. As for the aftermath, he did not have time to care about it. After leaving the Shia sect, he rushed back to Tianzhu Mountain as fast as lightning. Huanglong Daoist followed him closely and asked about the situation while rushing back. Master, Ancestor Shuepao was seriously injured by you and fled. Is this over? Let's go back to Tianju Mountain. Aren't you worried that there are other demon powerhouses hiding nearby? Ji Tianxing answered without turning his head. Ancestor Shuepao is the commander of those demons. Even he was seriously injured and fled. The other demons must have fled. Even if there are a few demons left, they can't cause much trouble. All the sects can deal with them together. What I'm worried about now is that the demons or other forces will take the opportunity to invade Tianju Mountain. After all, you and I are not on Tianju Mountain. Huanglong Daoist felt that it was reasonable and muttered in his heart, "That's true. We are not on Tianju Mountain. Our sect's defense is weak. If someone attacks Tianju Mountain and destroys our base, the loss will be too great." After the incident in the West River Valley, he had learned the corresponding lesson. He decided that after returning to Tianju Mountain, he would order all the major sects to be informed. Once the demons were found to be causing trouble, all the sects would inform each other and join forces to deal with the demons. Unknowingly, it was noon. Ji Tianxing and Huanglong Daoist were flying above a dark green forest. In all directions, there were vast mountain ranges and towering peaks. This area was very quiet. There were no sounds of birds or beasts in the forest. It was a little strange. Ji Tianxing had a bad premonition. He could not help but frown. He released his divine sense and spread it around. Huanglong Daoist saw his strange expression and also realized that something was wrong. He asked, "Master, did you find something?" Ji Tianxing was silent. He used his divine sense to explore a radius of 100 miles. He did not find anything unusual. Thus, he shook his head and said, "It's nothing. Let's just leave." As he spoke, he sped up and flew over the forest. Huanglong Daoist suppressed the doubts in his heart and quickly followed him. However, at this moment, a sudden change occurred in the world. In the vast forest below, a dazzling 5-colored light suddenly lit up the sky. Shua! At the same time, 5-colored brilliance lit up in all directions, soaring into the sky and forming a huge light screen in the blink of an eye, enveloping an area of 200 miles in radius. The huge 5-colored light screen quickly closed, forming a light barrier that sealed off the entire area. An invisible force of heaven and earth came from all directions, fiercely suppressing Ji Tianxing and the Huanglong Daoist. Suddenly, the two of them felt as if they had been grabbed by an invisible hand. Their flying speed suddenly decreased, and they had no choice but to stop. "Master, someone is ambushing us." Huanglong Daoist sensed that something was wrong. His face immediately turned cold, and his eyes were cold. He cast a spell with his left hand and held the horsetail whisk in his right hand. He released his divine sense to explore the surroundings, looking for the culprit. Ji Tianxing's expression was still calm as he stood calmly in the sky. He secretly used the armillary sphere secret technique and merged himself with heaven and earth. Instantly, the suppressive force of the formation was dispelled. At the same time, a cold laugh came from the sky above the two of them. "Since you've fallen into my trap, do you think you can leave alive? You must be dreaming." It was the voice of a middle-aged man. It was cold and mocking, and it was as sharp as metal clashing. It was quite ear-piercing. Ji Tianxing immediately realized that the man's voice was fake. He had deliberately used magic power to change his voice. He looked up at the sky and saw a thin and tall figure standing 1,000 feet above him. It was a mysterious man in black clothes and a black robe. He wore a green bronze mask with fangs on his face. The mask covered his entire face, revealing only a pair of cold and indifferent eyes. From the outside, this person covered himself up tightly, and there were no distinguishing features at all. Other than the fact that he was a man, there was no other information about him. Ji Tianxing stared sharply at the black-robed man and said coldly, "It's just a saint-level great annihilation formation. It's nothing. If you think that you can trap us with just this grand formation, then you're really too naive." Hearing this, the black-robed man frowned slightly, and his dark pupils contracted. Obviously, his heart was filled with shock. He didn't dare believe that Ji Tianxing was actually able to see through the details of this grand formation in such a short period of time and accurately call out its name. However, his expression quickly returned to normal, and he said coldly, "With the Huanglong Taoist protecting you, of course the Great Annihilation Formation can't do anything to you. However, since I've made my move, there's no way I'll leave anyone alive. You and the Huanglong Taoist will both be buried here. There's no way you can escape." As soon as he finished speaking, the black-robed man raised his palms, and his 10 fingers formed a spell. A 5-colored stream of light shot out, forming a mysterious spell seal. The spell seal was injected into the 5-colored light shield, and immediately, the light shield released a destructive power. Within the light shield, thousands of 5-colored giant swords were instantly condensed, forming a murderous sword formation. They attacked Ji Tianxing and the Huanglong Taoist. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The sword light flashed, and the sword chi swept across the sky, sealing the area within 100 miles. Ji Tianxing and the Huanglong Taoist had nowhere to hide, and they were immediately engulfed by the sword light. Of course, the two of them did not intend to hide. Huanglong Taoist's left palm struck out several palm shadows, and his right hand waved the horsetail whisk, shooting out sword light to meet the 5-colored giant swords. He used the Big Dipper step, and the horsetail whisk used the sword technique. The sword light actually covered the sky and formed a circular sword net, protecting himself and Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing ignored the sword light illusions around him, and he coldly stared at the black-robed man. He said in a deep voice, "You call yourself emperor, and you have the techniques of a martial saint. You must be a martial saint powerhouse who has been famous for a long time. There aren't many martial saints on the Shenwu continent, and there are less than 100 of them. Do you dare tell me your name?" The black-robed man did not hesitate and bluntly said, "I don't dare. Don't embarrass yourself in front of this emperor with such lowly provocation. Moreover, it doesn't matter who this emperor is. You only need to know that this emperor has received a sky-high bounty mission and is here to kill you." When Huanglong Taoist heard this, he was immediately enraged, and he cursed with murderous intent. "You bastard, a dignified martial saint actually wants to be an assassin. You don't deserve to be a martial saint. There are many powers that want to deal with our Tianzhu peak, but this is the first time I've seen someone as despicable as you." The black-robed man was cursed at, but he still maintained his composure, and his eyes remained indifferent as he continued to cast his spell. Ji Tianxing saw through the clues, and he raised his eyebrows and sneered, "Huanglong, you're wrong. This guy is definitely not an assassin. Moreover, there isn't any astronomical bounty on him." Chapter 1928. The Huanglong Taoist was also puzzled. Which martial saint would become a killer or an assassin? In the entire Shenwu continent, which martial saint was not an overlord who ruled over an empire? When he heard Ji Tianxing's words, he immediately understood. He stared coldly at the black-robed man and said in a contemptuous tone, "He, not only are you hiding, but you're also making up lies to hide your identity. You're such a disgrace." Ji Tianxing nodded in agreement. "That's right. As a martial saint, he's so disgraced that he might as well kill himself. He's guilty and doesn't have the confidence to kill us, which is why he doesn't dare to reveal his identity. In order to hide his identity, he even made up such a shallow and laughable lie." The two of them echoed each other, degrading the black-robed man to the point that he was worthless and ashamed. The black-robed man was someone who held a high position and lived like a prince. How could he endure such direct humiliation? He was so angry that his body trembled, and his eyes were covered with a layer of purple light that flickered with lightning. If looks could kill, then Ji Tianxing and the Huanglong Taoist would have been cut into pieces. "Ji Tianxing, old Taoist Huanglong, no matter how much you ridicule me, it's useless. Your fate has already been decided. Today, I swear that I will kill the two of you and tear you to pieces. I'll grind your bones and scatter your ashes to vent the hatred in my heart." As soon as he finished speaking, the black-robed man waved his hands and formed a spell. He controlled the thousands of multicolored swords and fiercely attacked Ji Tianxing, and the Huanglong Taoist. Previously, the thousands of swords had formed a sword net that had wrapped around the two of them and slaughtered them without restraint. But now, the thousands of sword lights had gathered together and formed a torrent of multicolored light that descended from the sky. At this moment, the power of the entire absolute annihilation formation was gathered together, and it was extremely shocking. The two of them had no time to dodge and were immediately submerged by the multicolored light. Boom! A deafening explosion reverberated through the mountains. The dazzling multicolored light was even more dazzling than the sun in the sky. At the critical moment, Ji Tianxing used the armillary heaven secret technique in time, and his body merged with the heaven and earth within 1,000 miles. His entire body became transparent and disappeared into thin air. Thousands of five-colored giant swords slashed down, cutting through the sky without any delay and smashing into the sea of trees below. Instantly, the forest within a radius of 50 kilometers was blasted into ruins. Mud and wood chips flew everywhere. Huanglong Taoist was also hit by the multicolored torrent. It fell from the sky and smashed into the forest below. However, there was a heart-protecting mirror on his chest. It was a saint-level treasure that Qin Shin had bestowed upon him. When he was hit by the five-colored torrent, the palm-sized heart protection mirror immediately blossomed with a dense green light, forming a shield to protect him. Boom! With a muffled thud, he fell from the sky and smashed into the ruins, creating a 1,000-foot-deep hole in the ground. The azure light shield collapsed, and he lay at the bottom of the pit, covered in mud. He struggled a few times before he got up. Although he looked a little disheveled, he was only slightly injured. However, he was only slightly injured, and his magic power was a little chaotic. In an instant, he was back to normal. He used his dermic powers to shake off the dust on his body. He immediately rushed out of the deep pit and flew back to the sky. The black-robed man was still standing at the top of the multicolored light shield. He was using his secret technique with all his might to control the power of the entire formation. Seeing that Huanglong Taoist had returned to the sky safe and sound, his eyes were filled with anger, and he roared with murderous intent. "Old Taoist Huanglong, go to hell!" Sky-shattering slash. He stretched out his palms and slashed downwards as if he was using all his strength. Both ends of the multicolored light shield surged with mighty multicolored light, forming 2,000-foot-long multicolored giant swords that slashed at Huanglong Taoist at the same time. The 2,000-foot-long giant swords were like two giant guillotines. They slashed down from the left and right, and their power was incomparably terrifying. It was as if the world was about to be cut in half on the spot. When Huanglong Taoist heard this angry roar, he immediately frowned, and a hint of suspicion flashed in his eyes. He vaguely remembered that he seemed to have heard of this secret technique that merged the formation with the sword technique somewhere before. However, the situation was critical, and he did not have time to think about this problem. 10,000 swords returned. At the critical moment, Huanglong Taoist used his sword manipulation technique and used his divine will to control the 10,000 swords in the void. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Tens of thousands of pitch-black cracks instantly appeared in the sky in all directions. A golden sword flew out from each crack and flew towards Huanglong Taoist at the speed of light. Tens of thousands of golden swords gathered around him and immediately condensed into a huge shield of golden light. In the next moment, 2,000-foot-long giant swords descended from the sky and slashed at the sword light shield with a deafening sound. Boom! Crack! The two multicolored giant swords collapsed and turned into endless fragments that burst out in all directions. The shield formed by tens of thousands of swords was also shattered and turned back into tens of thousands of golden swords that scattered in the sky. Huanglong Taoist's figure appeared, and he was still safe and sound. He stood in the sky and quickly waved his arms, forming a sword technique seal to control the tens of thousands of golden swords. Unifying chi of heaven and earth, the sword cuts through the void. He shouted coldly and angrily, He formed a sword technique with both hands and pointed at the black-robed man in the sky. Suddenly, the tens of thousands of golden swords changed direction and stabbed at the black-robed man like a dense rain of arrows. Boom, 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 boom. The tens of thousands of golden swords fiercely stabbed at the formation, causing the multicolored light shield to shake nonstop. Layers of ripples appeared and flashed with multicolored brilliance. A muffled sound exploded and reverberated fiercely in the formation, causing the ground to shake. Although the Heaven and Earth Annihilation formation was very powerful, and the multicolored light shield's defense was also very strong. However, Huanglong Daoists controlled the tens of thousands of swords and continued to attack the formation, concentrating their attacks on a small area. That area could not withstand such a fierce attack at all. Soon, cracks began to appear, and cracking sounds could be heard. Seeing that the formation was about to be broken by Huanglong Daoist, the black-robed man was extremely anxious and angry. He shouted coldly and quickly formed a Dharma seal with both hands, controlling the formation's power to repair the cracks in that area. However, at this moment, Ji Tianxing, who had been invisible all this time, suddenly appeared outside the formation. He transformed into thousands of miles of heaven and earth, and had quietly escaped the formation's range. Swoosh! He suddenly appeared thousands of feet behind the black-robed man and slashed out a giant golden sword that was thousands of feet long. Sky-splitting sword. The giant golden sword that was thousands of feet long was his primordial soul golden sword. The giant sword was surrounded by four-colored lightning and silver star divine fire. Its power was very terrifying. The black-robed man did not expect Ji Tianxing to escape the formation in such a strange way and appear behind him. When the giant sword slashed down, he sensed that something was wrong, but it was too late to dodge. Kaboom! Chapter 1929. A dazzling golden light enveloped the black-robed man and sent him flying into the distance. His black robe was in tatters and hung on his body like a pile of rags, making him look somewhat pathetic. However, he was a martial sage after all, and his physical defense was extremely strong. Ji Tianxing's sword did not injure him and did not leave a wound on his body. His divine soul was only shaken, and his consciousness went into a temporary state of blur. After flying for 10 miles, he regained his consciousness and returned to normal. At this moment, Huanglong Daoist had already controlled the 10,000 swords and destroyed the 5-colored light shield. Crack! With a crisp cracking sound, a huge gap appeared in the 5-colored light shield, and shards of light splattered all over the sky. With the gap as the center, dense cracks extended in all directions and quickly spread across the entire formation. Swoosh! Huanglong Daoist passed through the gap and escaped from the ultimate annihilation formation. He sped through the sky and attacked the black-robed man, while controlling the 10,000 golden swords to attack. Swish! 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 The 10,000 golden swords streaked across the sky like a rain of arrows that covered the sky and drowned the black-robed man. At this critical moment, the black-robed man hurriedly cast a spell to form a shield to block the golden swords. Bam! 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 Countless golden swords stabbed him, causing the shield to swell and deform. Huanglong Daoist flew to 10,000 feet away from him and cast a sword spell with a serious expression, controlling the 10,000 swords to form a sword formation. Universal Sword Formation. In just 2 breaths, the sword formation formed by the 10,000 swords covered a radius of 10 miles. The black-robed man was trapped in the sword formation and was attacked by the 10,000 swords. He immediately fell into a dangerous situation and could only defend himself tiredly. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Huanglong Daoist hurriedly sent a voice transmission to Ji Tianxing and said, "Master, I'll hold this person back. You should quickly return to Tianzhu Mountain." However, Ji Tianxing didn't agree. He transmitted his voice. "There's no hurry. This person set up a formation to ambush us here. Obviously, He knows our whereabouts. Even if I can't kill him, I will find out his background. Huanglong Taoist immediately understood what he meant. As a martial sage, the black-robed man wanted to assassinate Ji Tianxing but did not dare to reveal his identity. This meant that there was something wrong with his identity. This person actually knew Ji Tianxing's whereabouts. This was even more problematic. Huanglong Taoist controlled the universal sword formation with all his might and attacked the black-robed man with all his might, preventing him from escaping. Previously, the black-robed man had used the formation to trap Ji Tianxing and Huanglong Taoist and attack them wantonly. Now that Ji Tianxing and Huanglong Taoist had escaped from the formation, he was trapped by the universal sword formation and was in great danger. The situation of both sides was immediately reversed. Ji Tianxing was about to use his secret technique and join hands with the Huanglong Taoist to attack the black-robed man. At this moment, in the sky not far away, two streams of light suddenly flew over. Within the two five-colored flowing lights, there were two black-robed martial artists. Both of them were tall and had cold faces. Both of them held their treasured swords and rushed over as fast as lightning. They recklessly rushed towards Ji Tianxing, brandishing their swords and thrusting out sword shadows that filled the sky. Clearly, these two black-clothed men were in cahoots with the black-robed man. However, the strength of these two people was relatively low. They were only at the 6th or 7th level of the Tribulation Transcendent stage. Swish, swish, dozens of sword lights, hundreds of feet long, came from all directions and surrounded Ji Tianxing. He was fearless. His body merged with the primordial spirit golden sword and launched a counterattack. Vermilion Bird Sacred Sword. The gigantic sword ignited with golden flames and condensed into the shadow of a vermilion bird that was as large as a mountain. The vermilion bird then slashed at one of them. Boom! The huge sword shattered a few sword lights with a loud bang. It streaked across the sky for 10 miles and slashed towards the head of a black-clothed man. The black-clothed man was suddenly shocked. His eyes revealed a strong sense of fear as he hurriedly retreated to avoid it. As he retreated, he brandished his sword and slashed out sword lights while channeling his energy to condense a magical power shield. However, the power of the Vermilion Bird Sacred Sword was far beyond his imagination. Boom! A loud explosion burst out and shook the sky. The sword lights that the black-clothed man slashed out shattered one after another. The magical power shield also collapsed on the spot. He was slashed by the Vermilion Bird Sacred Sword. His body instantly collapsed like a broken porcelain bowl, shattering into more than a dozen pieces. Dark red blood splattered out, blooming in the sky and sprinkling down one after another. A cloud of dense white mist flew out from the pieces of flesh and blood. This was the black-clothed man's soul. However, just as his soul flew out, it was burned to ashes by the golden flames before it could escape. The power of the Vermilion Bird Sacred Sword did not only lie in its violent lethality, but also the power of the raging flames that could burn the heavens and destroy the earth. After killing a black-clothed man with a single slash, the primordial spirit golden sword changed direction and slashed towards another black-clothed man. That black-clothed man witnessed his comrade being killed in an instant with his own eyes. He immediately trembled in fear and instinctively turned around to flee. However, his speed was far inferior to Ji Tianxing's, and he was caught up in an instant. Azure Dragon Sacred Sword. An azure light burst out from the giant sword and condensed into the projection of an azure dragon that was over 10,000 feet long. The projection of the azure dragon wrapped around the giant sword and erupted with earth-shattering divine power as it pierced towards the black-clothed man. The black-clothed man's eyes were filled with horror as he hurriedly took out a talisman. Escape Talisman. The talisman ignited with dazzling flames and turned into a ball of blazing white light that enveloped his entire body. Swoosh! With a flash of white light, his figure disappeared into thin air, escaping into the void. This escape talisman could help him teleport 5 kilometers away and save his life in the nick of time. Almost at the same time as his figure disappeared, the azure dragon sacred sword struck the spot where he was standing. Kaboom! Suddenly, the azure dragon sacred sword blasted open a pitch-black crack in the sky, revealing the ice-cold void. The loud noise shook the sky and the void trembled. The power of space also became chaotic. White light enveloped the black-clothed man. He had just entered the void, but before he could escape far, he was sent flying. When the void trembled, he was squeezed out of the void and returned to the sky with a swoosh. The black-clothed man was dumbfounded and his face was filled with horror. He could not believe that Ji Tianxing actually pierced through the sky and forced him out of the void. This was simply unimaginable. In the past, he had encountered many life and death situations and was always able to use escape talismans to escape. That was why he was able to survive until now. However, this time, he had a premonition that his doomsday had arrived. Swoosh! The azure dragon's sacred sword flashed with azure light and instantly pierced through the sky and slashed towards his head. The black-clothed man was in complete despair. He did not hesitate to use a secret technique. His entire body ignited with 5-colored spiritual flames as he frantically retreated. However, it was futile. His fate was already sealed. Bang! With a muffled sound, the azure dragon sacred sword struck him. The 5-colored spiritual flames were extinguished on the spot, and his magic power shield shattered. His physical body was also fragmented and blood splattered everywhere. Even his divine soul could not escape and was shattered by the azure dragon sacred sword. The two black-clothed men were killed by Ji Tianxing. Chapter 1930. The battle between the Huanglong Taoist and the black-robed man had reached its climax. When Ji Tianxing returned to the battlefield, all he saw was golden light bursting into the sky, and the shadows of spells blotted out the sun. Loud noises could be heard, shaking heaven and earth. The universal sword formation was riddled with holes by the black-robed man. It could no longer be maintained and was about to collapse. Countless golden swords were shattered, turning into fragments of golden light that scattered in the sky. The black-robed man did not have it easy either. His clothes were tattered, and his body was covered in blood. In the battle just now, he had been attacked by the universal sword formation more than 100,000 times. Even though he had blocked 99% of the sword radiance, he had still been hit by hundreds of times. No matter how strong his physical defense was, he could not withstand such a violent attack. His chest, back, arms, and legs were all covered in wounds, and fresh blood seeped out. This made him furious. His entire body emitted a murderous aura, and blood-red flames ignited around him. He could not remember how many years it had been since he had been injured like this. He had carefully planned to ambush Ji Tianxing and the Huanglong Taoist. In the end, he did not manage to kill them. Instead, he was beaten black and blue. This was a great humiliation. The black-robed man's heart was filled with shame and anger. His murderous aura was boiling, and his eyes were covered with a layer of blood. Heavenly river flowing water, he suddenly roared. His left hand formed a spell, and his right hand waved a dark purple sword, which scattered sword shadows all over the sky. Suddenly, the wind and clouds in the sky were raging, and dazzling purple lightning flashed. Boundless gray clouds were quickly gathering, causing the sky within a radius of several hundred kilometers to darken. Such a terrifying scene was like the arrival of a heavenly tribulation. In the next moment, 9 holes appeared in the gray clouds, and dazzling divine flames from beyond the heavens surged out of the holes. The crimson divine flames were like pillars of water. They poured down from the holes and rushed toward the Huanglong Taoist. The so-called heavenly river flowing water was not water, but the flowing fire outside the Big Dipper's atmosphere. Suddenly, heaven and earth were illuminated by the flames, turning red. The terrifyingly hot temperature turned the sky a few hundred miles into a vacuum. The ground, which had long been in ruins, was scorched black. The wood chips scattered in the ruins turned into ashes, and the surrounding forest was set ablaze. Once the 9 pillars of heavenly flames poured down, everything within 1,000 miles would be scorched. Such a terrifying aura was the true power of a martial saint. Huang Long looked up at the sky and saw the 9 Big Dipper fire pillars descending from the sky. Immediately, a serious expression appeared on his face. He knew that the all-form sword formation could not be repaired, nor could it withstand the power of the Big Dipper fire pillar. Whoosh! His figure flashed and disappeared into the void. In the next instant, he was dozens of miles away. Withdraw! He made a gesture with both hands and shouted in a low voice. Then, he put away all the sword lights in the sky. Instantly, the thousands of golden swords disappeared into the void without a trace. Almost at the same time, 9 Big Dipper fire pillars descended from the sky and poured down on the ruins. A series of muffled explosions reverberated between heaven and earth, lasting for a long time. 9 huge pits immediately appeared on the ground, bursting with torrential flames and lava. The rocks and soil were burned into crimson lava that spread in all directions. The area within 100 miles turned into a sea of fire. The surging waves of fire spread in all directions and soon covered more than 500 miles. The ground in this area turned into a lake of lava, and the surrounding forest was turned into ashes. Even the mountains, which were thousands of feet tall, were burned red and quickly collapsed. The destructive power continued for a long time without stopping. It was only when the area within a radius of 800 miles turned into a sea of fire and a lake of lava that the power of the heavenly flames began to weaken. By this time, Ji Tianxing and the Huanglong Taoist had already retreated 800 miles away. The black-robed man was unwilling to give up. He flew across the sky at lightning speed and chased after the two of them. Ji Tianxing and the Huanglong Taoist used a secret technique. Their figures flickered in the sky, and they flew in the direction of the heavenly Pillar Mountain. The two of them were extremely fast, and they were like lightning. The black-robed man chased for a while, but he couldn't catch up with them. He could only watch as their figures disappeared into the sky. The black-robed man had no choice but to give up the chase. He cursed angrily. Damn bastards. They were so arrogant just now, but in the blink of an eye, they ran away with their tails between their legs. How despicable. But I can't chase them to the heavenly Pillar Mountain. That's their home ground. With the help of the Sword of Burial of Heaven, their strength will increase greatly. The black-robed man clenched his fists so tightly that they creaked. His eyes were filled with murderous intent, and his whole body was emitting a cold chill. He looked at the horizon and muttered to himself in a low voice, "You are lucky this time. The next time I attack, it will be the time of your death." After saying that, the anger in his heart dissipated, and he turned to leave. Ji Tianxing and the Huanglong Taoist were flying in the sky. After flying for 3,000 miles, they slowed down when they saw that the black-robed man didn't chase after them. The Huanglong Taoist was puzzled. He couldn't help but ask Ji Tianxing through voice transmission, "Master, we clearly have the upper hand. We could have fought with that guy to the end. Why did we retreat?" In his opinion, although the heavenly river's water was powerful, it couldn't hurt him and Ji Tianxing. Neither of them were injured, but the black-robed man's injuries were not light. If they continued to fight, they would definitely be the ones to gain the upper hand. Ji Tianxing's lips curled into a playful smile. He explained through voice transmission, "After all, that person is a martial sage. Even if we use all our strength, we can't kill him. He has a way to escape. Since we can't kill him, why should we waste time and take the risk? Anyway, our main goal is to find out his identity and origin. Now that I have the answer, there's no need to be entangled with him." Hearing this, the Huanglong Taoist was suddenly energized. He asked expectantly, "Master, you already know who he is?" "Yes, I'm pretty sure." Ji Tianxing nodded and said, "Let's return to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains first. I'll be able to confirm the answer after I do some research." The Huanglong Taoist didn't ask any more questions. He suppressed the anticipation in his heart and continued to follow him. A few hours later, when the sun was about to set, the two of them returned to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. The heavenly formation was safe and sound. The peak of the mountain was also quiet. There was nothing unusual. Seeing this, Ji Tianxing secretly heaved a sigh of relief. I was worried that someone would attack the Pillar of Heaven's mountains when Huang Long and I left. Now it seems that I worried too much. This thought flashed through his mind. He brought Huang Long through the heavenly formation and returned to the dojo at the peak of the mountain. However, just as he landed on the dojo, the voice of the burial of heaven rang in his mind. Chapter 1931. When burial of heaven's voice sounded in his mind, Ji Tianxing realized that something was wrong. If everything was normal, burial of heaven would be sleeping in the sword steel, quietly recovering his primordial qi. As it turned out, his premonition was right. Something had happened at the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Swoosh! Ji Tianxing's figure flashed a few times and crossed dozens of miles, flying to the sword steel in the middle of the training hall. Burial of Heaven, what happened last night? Tell me in detail. He looked up at the sword steel and asked. Burial of Heaven explained in a low voice. Last night, 2 men in black sneaked into our sect and quietly came to the sword steel. One of them was a Tribulation Realm cultivator and hid not far away to observe. The other man in black was a martial sage and used his divine sense and secret techniques to investigate the sword steel as if he was looking for some secret. I sensed that something was wrong and took the opportunity to sneak attack the martial sage, injuring his spiritual soul and fighting with him for 2 moves. That black-robed martial saint was very powerful. After blocking my attack, he fled with another black-robed man. After Burial of Heaven finished speaking, Ji Tianxing frowned, and his expression became serious. Those 2 men in black could freely pass through the heavenly dome array. They sneaked into our sect and quickly escaped from the Pillar of Heaven's mountains? That's impossible. Even a martial sage would not be able to break the heavenly dome array so easily. Burial of Heaven said in a low voice, unless one of them was a disciple of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and had a token to enter the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. That's right. Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and said coldly, that's the only explanation. It seems that my guess was right. There are still spies in our sect. I didn't expect that when Huang Long and I left the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, the spies would cooperate with the enemy from the inside. Burial of Heaven continued to analyze. That Tribulation of Heaven's black-clothed man should be a disciple of our sect. Only deacons and elders have tokens to enter and exit the heavenly dome array at will. Therefore, that person was either a deacon or an elder. In addition, this person was injured by my sword qi, and he won't be able to recover within half a month. As long as you check carefully, you will immediately find out who it is. Ji Tianxing nodded, and the corners of his mouth curled into a sneer. I've long since guessed who that person is, but I've never been able to confirm it. Since he's left something behind, I'll be able to find him right away. Burial of Heaven said calmly. That spy took orders from the black-robed martial sage. He was able to become an administrator and an elder. He must have hidden in the Pillar of Heaven's mountains for many years. If you want to deal with him swiftly and decisively, you need to seriously consider the consequences. It's fine. Ji Tianxing waved his hand and said with an indifferent expression, with me and Huang Long overseeing the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, what consequences can there be? He can't overturn the heavens. After a pause, he continued to ask, that's right, that black-robed martial sage, was he wearing a bronze mask with fangs, revealing only a pair of eyes? That's right. Burial of Heaven answered, and asked doubtfully, how do you know? Could it be that you've already fought with him? Ji Tianxing said with a sneer, of course. This person set up an ambush on my way back and tried to kill me and Huang Long, Burial of Heaven said without hesitation. It must be a spy from our sect who told that black-robed martial sage your whereabouts. Only a few people know that you and Huang Long went to Xia Valley. This way, it'll be easier to investigate the identity of that spy. Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and said, continue to recuperate. I'll go find that spy and interrogate him directly about the black-robed martial sage's identity. If it's too late, I'm afraid that the spy will flee for his crimes. After saying that, Ji Tianxing turned and left, flying towards Tianju Palace with Huanglong Daoist. After a while, the two arrived at the gate of Tianju Palace. Ji Tianxing walked towards the conference hall and said to Huanglong Daoist behind him, "Huanglong, go and bring Great Elder Nie Tianxin here. I want to see him now. If he tries to escape, don't be merciful, just capture him. Of course, you must keep him alive. I still have something to ask him." Huanglong Daoist felt a biting cold murderous intent from his cold tone and couldn't help but silently mourn for Nie Tianxin. Disciple obeys. Huanglong Daoist cupped his hands and hurriedly left, rushing towards the palace in the east. Ji Tianxing stepped into the conference hall and walked steadily to the throne at the head of the table. As he walked through the hall, the walls on both sides lit up, illuminating the dark hall. He climbed onto the bronze throne and sat for a while. Ji Bai and Shohei rushed over after hearing the news and saluted him. After the two saluted him, they stood respectfully behind him, guarding the left and right sides of the throne. After a while, Huanglong Daoist brought Great Elder to the door of the conference hall. Huanglong Daoist entered the conference hall first and stood in the middle of the conference hall. Great Elder followed behind Huanglong Daoist. His steps were steady, and his face was calm as he came to the conference hall. There was no abnormality. "Master, Great Elder Nie Tianxin is here." Huanglong Daoist cupped his hands and saluted Ji Tianxing, then retreated to the left side of the conference hall and stood still. Nie Tianxin came to the conference hall and saluted Ji Tianxing respectfully. He said in a low and powerful voice, "Grand Disciple Nie Tianxin greets Grandmaster. May I know why Grandmaster has summoned me?" His voice was full of energy, and his expression was calm. There was no problem. Ji Tianxing glanced at him coldly and said in a playful tone, "It has been 16 hours, and you haven't run away. This is really surprising." Nie Tianxin was stunned and asked in confusion, "Grandmaster, why do you say that? As a disciple of Tianju Mountain and the head of the elders, I am responsible for guarding the mountain gate and managing the affairs of the sect. Why would I run away for no reason?" Ji Tianxing suddenly laughed more and more playfully. "Ha! Your face didn't change. Your heartbeat and breathing were normal, and there was no abnormal change in your eyes. Nie Tianxin, your qi cultivation is really good. This is really surprising." Hearing this, Nie Tianxin frowned in confusion and said in a neither servile nor overbearing tone, "Please forgive me for being stupid. I don't understand what Grandmaster means." Ji Tianxing didn't beat around the bush with him. He put away the sneer on his face and asked with a dignified expression, "Nie Tianxin, let me ask you, were you last night at 3 o'clock in the morning?" Only then did Nie Tianxin show a look of realization. He quickly answered, "So that's what you're talking about. Master, last night at 3 o'clock in the morning, I was meditating in the conference hall. Suddenly, I heard a loud noise outside, and there was also the sound of a fierce fight. I quickly ended my meditation and rushed to the Taoist hall to take a look. Only then did I find that many disciples and guards were alarmed. Later, I asked them and found out that someone had sneaked into the sect and caused trouble." Nie Tianxin answered very smoothly. His expression and tone were very natural, and it didn't seem like he was lying at all. Chapter 1932. Ji Tianxing's expression remained solemn as he stared at Nie Tianxin with a piercing gaze. Even though Nie Tianxin was able to answer his questions fluently, he did not give up. He continued to ask, "Who can testify for you?" Nie Tianxin looked up at Ji Tianxing and answered without hesitation, "The second elder, the fourth elder, and the guards who were on duty that night can testify for me." Ji Tianxing did not say anything. He turned to look at the Huanglong Daoist and signaled him with his eyes. The Huanglong Daoist immediately understood. He flashed to Nie Tianxin's side and reached out his hand to grab Nie Tianxin's shoulder. Nie Tianxin was shocked and instinctively stepped back. However, he was only a tribulation passing martial monarch. How could he escape from the Huanglong Daoist's grasp? As soon as he took a step back, the Huanglong Daoist's big hand pressed down on his shoulder. He could not move at all. His body was frozen on the spot, and his face was filled with anxiety and fear. "Master, what are you doing? I didn't do anything wrong. Why are you doing this to me for no reason. Nie Tianqian looked at the Huanglong Taoist and asked with grief and indignation. The Huanglong Taoist was still expressionless. A powerful surge of magic power gushed out of his palm and enveloped Nie Tianqian's body. Immediately, Nie Tianqian's magic power was sealed. His body was also enveloped by magic power. He could not struggle at all. Ji Tianxing said calmly, "Your master is worried about your health. He's just checking your injuries. Why are you so flustered?" Nie Tianqian could not move his body, but he could still move his neck. He quickly shook his head and said angrily, "I'm fine. I'm not injured at all. There's no need to check." Ji Tianxing said expressionlessly, "That's not necessarily true. There was an invasion last night. Maybe you were unintentionally injured and you didn't even notice it?" Nie Tianqian instantly realized what Nie Tian was trying to say. Growing even more anxious and nervous, he hastily explained, "Even though I was injured, it was because I fought against powerful enemies to protect our sect. However, I only suffered some light injuries and have long since recovered. There is no need for Grandmaster and Master to worry." Last night in the training hall, he was swept by the sword chi of the Burial of Heaven and was indeed slightly injured, leaving a wound on his back. However, after the incident, he used a secret technique and medicinal pills to heal his injuries, and his injuries had long been healed. Even the wound on his back had recovered to normal and could no longer be seen. He thought that Ji Tianxing and Huanglong Taoist were not at Tianju Mountain, and no one saw him with their own eyes. He was hoping that he wouldn't be exposed, so he continued to stay in the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Even when Huanglong Taoist came looking for him and told him that Ji Tianxing wanted to see him, he was not afraid. After all, he was very secretive and did not leave any traces behind. He was not afraid that Ji Tianxing and Huanglong Taoist would investigate him. However, when he heard Ji Tianxing's words, he began to panic. As Ji Tianxing said, perhaps the sword of the Burial of Heaven had left some marks on his body that he did not even notice. At the thought of this, Nie Tianxian's heart was burning with anxiety, and fine beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. Fortunately, Huanglong Taoist soon finished examining him and released him. However, Nie Tianqian did not dare to relax. He was secretly vigilant and quietly retreated. His right hand was hidden in his sleeve, secretly holding a white pearl the size of a date pit. He was ready to escape at any time. The white pearl was a life-saving item given to him by Lord Yi. Once it was activated, he could teleport hundreds of miles away. If Ji Tianxing and Huanglong Taoist wanted to harm him, he would activate the pearl without hesitation and escape from Tianju Mountain. Of course, the pearl could only be used once. After that, it would dissolve and dissipate. He had to be very careful. Huanglong Taoist took a step back expressionlessly. He turned to look at Ji Tianxing and shook his head slightly. He seemed to be saying that he did not find anything unusual. Ji Tianxing frowned. A hint of confusion flashed in his eyes, but he did not say anything. Nie Tianqian stared at Ji Tianxing, waiting for his reaction. His nerves were stretched to the limit. The veins on his hand that was holding the white pearl were bulging, and his palms were sweating. It was only 2 breaths, but it felt as long as 2 months. Finally, Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and said calmly, "Since Grand Elder is so loyal to our sect, you may leave." To Nie Tianqian, his words were like music to his ears. Nie Tianqian's nerves immediately relaxed. His heart, which had been in his throat, also fell back into his stomach. He secretly let out a sigh of relief. His whole body seemed to have been drained of all strength. He quietly put away the white pearl and took a deep breath. Trying to keep his voice calm, he said, "If there's nothing else, I'll take my leave." Ji Tianxing nodded expressionlessly and said, "Go." Nie Tianqian clasped his hands and bowed. Then, he turned around and walked toward the door. Ji Tianxing's sharp eyes noticed that drops of cold sweat were flowing down Nie Tianqian's neck and back. This tiny detail caused the corners of his mouth to curl up into a sneer, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. At the same time, Huanglong Taoist, who had been silent all this time, suddenly raised his hands and grabbed at Nie Tianqian's back. His palms burst out with dazzling golden light, forming a giant golden palm that enveloped Nie Tianxin's body. Nie Tianxin was secretly relieved. He thought to himself, "Damn Ji Tianxing. His intuition is so sharp that he actually suspected me and confronted me face to face. Fortunately, I was quick-witted and answered without any flaws. That's why I was able to escape this disaster. It seems I'll have to be more careful from now on. I can't let any flaws slip." He was distracted and did not guard against Huanglong Dao's sudden attack. By the time he sensed danger approaching, it was already too late for him to dodge. Bam! With a muffled thump, the giant golden hand grabbed Nie Tianxin and held him in a tight grip. Nie Tianxin's expression changed drastically. He unleashed all of his magic power and struggled with all his might. However, the giant golden palm sealed his magic power, making him unable to move at all. He could only watch as Huanglong Daoist grabbed him with a cold smile on his face. He wanted to take out the white pearl from his space ring and teleport out of the pillar of Heaven's mountains. However, this was only an extravagant hope. His divine soul was imprisoned, and there was nothing he could do. Master, what are you doing?" Frightened, he glared at Huanglong and asked, "What's wrong?" Huanglong Daoist sneered and said in a playful tone, "Don't you know what I'm doing? Tell me. I've treated you well. Why are you colluding with foreign enemies?" Nie Tianxin widened his eyes in horror and quickly shook his head to deny it. "No, Master, you must be mistaken. I've been loyal to you and the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. I've never colluded with foreign enemies." Chapter 1933. Black-robed martial sage. Nie Tianxin widened his eyes and stared at Huanglong in bewilderment, as if he had no idea what was going on. Black-robed martial sage? When I arrived at the Taoist sanctum last night, the fight had already ended. I only heard from others that there were black-robed men fighting in the Taoist sanctum. I don't know anything about the black-robed martial sage. Nie Tianxin defended himself with a serious expression, as if he really meant what he said. His expression, tone, and eyes did not seem to be lying. However, the Huanglong Daoist already knew the answer. He stared at Nie Tianxin coldly, his eyes full of mockery. "Ha ha! Nie Tianxin, you have been in the Pillar of Heaven's mountain for hundreds of years. I have been guiding you and watching you grow up. I thought you were a trustworthy person. However, today, I realized I was wrong. I don't know the real you at all. I'm amazed by your acting skills. Keep pretending. Keep pretending." Nie Tianxin looked at Daoist Huanglong with an aggrieved expression, as if he had suffered a great deal. "Master, where did you get all this from? I have done nothing wrong. Why are you framing me?" Ji Tianxing could not stand it anymore. He did not want to see Nie Tianxin's hypocritical face anymore. He asked directly, "Nie Tianxin, you said that the fight had already ended when you arrived at the Taoist sanctum. You didn't see any black-robed men. You only heard about it from others. Let me ask you, why was the sword chi of the holy sword still in your body when you were injured last night?" Nie Tianxin was stunned. A hint of panic flashed in his eyes. However, he remained calm. He pretended to be confused and asked, "What? The sword chi of the holy sword? That's impossible. I was never injured." "Ha ha ha." The sneer on Ji Tianxing's face deepened as he questioned, "Didn't you just say that you were slightly injured in order to protect our sect and that you've already recovered? How are you going to cover up your lie when you contradict yourself?" Nie Tianxin was at a loss for words. His eyes darted around as he tried to think of a way to explain himself. Ji Tianxing continued, "Last night, the black-robed martial sage fought with the sacred sword and was repelled by the sacred sword before fleeing. There was also a black-clothed man who held the sect's medallion and brought the black-robed martial sage into the sect. Then he followed the black-robed martial sage out of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. This person was a spy who colluded with foreign enemies. When the sacred sword had attacked the black-robed martial sage, the sword light had struck the spy, leaving behind sword chi in his body. Nie Tianxin, do you have anything else to say?" With these words, Ji Tianxing's eyes were as sharp as swords, and his body burst forth with heaven-suppressing divine might that swept toward Nie Tianxin. Nie Tianxin's expression changed instantly. He hurriedly shook his head and explained, No, that's impossible. I'm not a spy, and I don't have any sword chi in my body. If there really was the sword chi of the Saint Sword, how could I not know? Ji Tianxing didn't say anything. Instead, he winked at the Huanglong Taoist. Huanglong Taoist raised his left hand and shot out a ray of blazing white light, which penetrated into Nie Tianxin's body. After the blazing white light entered the depths of Nie Tianxin's body, it dug out a strand of black sword chi that was as thin as a hair and slowly flew out. Huanglong Taoist held the strand of black sword chi in his left hand and stretched it toward Nie Tianxin. He said coldly, "Nie Tianxin, what else do you want to say?" Nie Tianxin's eyes widened as he stared at the strand of black sword chi. His whole body stiffened. His mind was blank. All the excuses he had prepared before were useless at this moment. He stared blankly at the strand of black sword chi and shook his head with a pale face. He murmured, "This is impossible, absolutely impossible." At this time, Ji Tianxing continued, "Nie Tianxin, you probably don't know how magical the sky spell that I set up personally is. Only disciples who are deacons and above can freely enter and exit the sky spell with their identity badges. The sky spell has a record of which badges have entered and exited the sky spell every day. Before you came to the main hall, I had already checked the record of last night's entry and exit. Unfortunately, you entered and exited the sky spell a total of 4 times last night." Hearing this, Nie Tianxin widened his eyes in horror. His face was full of disbelief, and he was almost stunned. He couldn't believe that the sky spell had such an effect. Wasn't this too inconceivable? Ji Tianxing sneered and said slowly, "After checking your entry and exit records, I've already guessed what happened. Yesterday, after Huanglong and I left Tianzhu Mountain, you realized that your chance had come. So you contacted the black-robed martial sage and prepared to take action at night. Last night, you disguised yourself as a black-robed man and quietly left Tianzhu Mountain to meet the black-robed martial sage. Half an hour later, you took the black-robed martial sage through the sky spell and returned to Tianzhu Mountain to explore the sword steel in the middle of the dojo. The holy sword suddenly attacked the black-robed martial sage and caused a huge commotion. The black-robed martial sage was worried that the plan would be exposed, so he took you and left Tianzhu Mountain. 15 minutes later, the black-robed martial sage left, and you secretly escaped to Tianzhu Mountain. Then, you resumed your identity as the Grand Elder and pretended that you had discovered something unusual and went to the dojo to meet everyone. After that, Ji Tianxing stared at Nie Tianxin and asked with a cold smile, "What do you think? Am I right?" Nie Tianxin was already dumbfounded. He stared at Su Kei in horror and pursed his lips without saying a word. Apparently, Ji Tianxing's deduction was completely correct and matched the facts. Nie Tianxin could no longer refute this. He was in complete despair. Knowing that his identity had been exposed, he stopped pretending. "He, ha ha," Nie Tianxin sneered in a low voice. Then, he raised his head and laughed wildly. "As expected of the descendant of Kenshin, you have such a brilliant method. I have always been cautious, and I have not been discovered for hundreds of years. I didn't expect you to see through me in the end. Since you can come back alive, it means that the plan of the Grand Elder has failed." Nie Tianxin stared at Ji Tianxing ferociously and sneered, "But don't be too proud of yourself. The Grand Elder has never failed to do anything he wants to do. You are lucky to come back alive. But next time, you will not be so lucky. You will definitely die. Tianzhu Mountain will be razed to the ground." Ji Tianxing was not angry. He looked at Nie Tianxin expressionlessly and asked, "I am very confused. You have joined Tianzhu Mountain for hundreds of years and lived here for a few decades. Huanglong is your master, and he taught you a unique skill and taught you how to cultivate. Even if you're a stubborn rock, you should have feelings. Why are you so heartless and willing to be the enemy's lackey to destroy Tianzhu Mountain, your own people and your master?" Nie Tianxin knew that he was going to die, so he did not hide anything. He sneered and said, Before I joined Tianzhu Mountain, I was a powerful man with a wife and a family. If I didn't follow orders, my life and my family would be in danger. However, I was ordered to join Tianzhu Mountain as a spy. That way, I could protect my wife and my family and help my descendants to achieve great things. Chapter 1934. Apparently, Nie Tianqian had no choice but to submit to the black-robed martial sage's threats and promises. Huanglong Taoist frowned and sneered. Nie Tianqian, this is not what you said when you entered the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and became my disciple. You said that your parents died and your family was wiped out by a powerful enemy. You escaped alone and had nowhere to go. Nie Tianqian glanced at him expressionlessly and said indifferently, "Of course, I lied to you. Everyone knows that you're a kind person. If I didn't use some tricks, how could I trick you into trusting me?" Huanglong's face was filled with anger as he cursed. "You bastard!" Nie Tianqian showed no remorse. He sneered and said, "Now that things have come to this, it's useless to say anything more. You don't have to waste your breath. I will never betray that lord. If you want to kill me or torture me, just do it." He acted like a dead pig that was not afraid of boiling water, which made Huanglong Taoist tremble with anger. However, Ji Tianxing didn't seem angry at all. Instead, he said with a grim face, "Nie Tianqian, do you think that you'll be able to keep your secret and protect your family by dying? Ha ha! You are too naive. You don't understand my methods at all. Sometimes, death is not scary. It is scary to live a life worse than death." As he spoke, he waved his hand, and a silver divine star of fire flew toward Nie Tianqian. Seeing the divine star of fire flying toward him, Nie Tianqian was not afraid at all. Instead, he sneered. "Ha ha! You're just extorting a confession by torture. I knew this day would come. Do you think I will be afraid of you?" Just as he finished speaking, the ball of star divine fire hit him. Boom! The divine star fire immediately spread out and covered Nie Tianqian's body like a layer of silver sand. Then, the divine star fire exploded with a violent power and started to burn Nie Tianqian's body. His robes and hair were quickly burned to ashes and scattered on the ground. His skin was also burned black by the divine star fire. It dried up and curled up, with black smoke rising from it. In the blink of an eye, his skin was burned to ashes. The extreme pain caused his entire body to twitch as he gritted his teeth and growled. Ji Tianxing was not moved at all. He controlled the star divine fire to continue burning his flesh. Immediately afterwards, Nie Tianqian's flesh and blood also turned black. Like a piece of coal, his flesh and blood began to crack and shatter, leaving behind a cloud of black ash. His body was curled up like a shrimp, and his originally tall body had turned into a lump of black charcoal. One could barely make out the shape of a human. However, the burning speed of the star divine fire was very slow. Only after a full 100 breaths of time did Nie Tianqian's fleshly body turn into black ashes. During this process, indescribable pain and torment constantly invaded his soul. This kind of torture was even more painful than being hacked into pieces. It was definitely not something an ordinary person could endure. Nie Tianqian gritted his teeth and let out agonized screams. However, he refused to beg for mercy. Finally, Nie Tianqian's flesh and skin were burned to a crisp. All that was left of him was a pitch-black skeleton. However, he still had a breath of life and didn't die on the spot. Then, Ji Tianxing controlled the star divine fire to burn his bones and meridians. The star divine fire rose fiercely and wrapped around his body tightly, giving rise to sizzling sounds and wisps of black smoke. Nie Tianqian fell to the ground and struggled in pain. He rolled over and over, letting out ear-piercing screams. However, since the bones were the hardest part of the fleshly body, Ji Tianxing deliberately controlled the star divine fire to slow down the burning speed. According to the current situation, it would take the star divine fire at least a quarter of an hour to burn his bones to ashes. In other words, Nie Tianqian would have to suffer for another quarter of an hour. Seeing him like this, Huanglong Taoist couldn't help but shout, "Nie Tianqian, you evil creature, are you still not willing to beg for mercy? You would rather be burned to ashes than reveal the identity of the black-robed martial sage." As Nie Tianqian ran back and forth in the hall, he called out in a low voice, "Ji, Ji Tianxing, if you have the guts, kill me and give me a quick death. You have underestimated my willpower. No matter how you torture me, I will never beg for mercy. Ji Tianxing shook his head and said with a cold smile, Do you want to die? I'm sorry, but in front of me, your life is not up to you. I won't kill you. On the contrary, I will let you live forever. Every day and night, you will be burned and tortured by the star divine fire, and you will struggle in endless pain. This is the punishment for a traitor. With these words, Ji Tianxing waved his right hand in the air, manipulating the cluster of divine flame in different ways to torture Nie Tianxin. Nie Tianxin's willpower was indeed strong. Half of his bones had been burned to ashes, but he still refused to speak. Ji Tianxing was not in a hurry. He continued to torture him with the star divine fire. Before they knew it, a quarter of an hour had passed. Nie Tianxin's bones had all been burned to ashes. Even his skull and teeth, which were the hardest part of his body, had been burned to ashes. His body had been completely destroyed. Only his divine soul was left, which was still wrapped in the star divine fire. At this moment, Nie Tianxin had been tortured to the point of mental breakdown. His divine soul had been severely injured, and his consciousness had become blurry. He could not hold on any longer. Stop! Stop it! Ji Tianxing, I'll tell you everything. Stop! Nie Tianxin's divine soul was fluctuating, and he let out a miserable wail. Finally, he began to beg for mercy. Ji Tianxing shook his head and said indifferently, Aren't you a man of integrity? Why don't you keep your mouth shut? I have just started to torture you, and you're already begging for mercy. How boring. Nie Tianxin was rendered speechless by Su Kei's sarcasm. He felt extremely humiliated and indignant. Of course, compared to the pain he was suffering, this humiliation was nothing. Don't you want to know the identity of the black-robed martial saint? I can tell you, but you have to promise me one thing. Nie Tianxin's divine soul was flickering with white light. His strength was getting weaker and weaker, but he was still struggling. Before he could finish, Ji Tianxing interrupted him and said contemptuously, Do you think you are qualified to negotiate with me? Do you think you're qualified? I already know the identity of the black-robed martial saint. You are useless now. Now, I will suppress you in the star divine furnace and let you be roasted by the divine fire for 1,000 years. I will let you die in endless pain. After saying that, Ji Tianxing waved his hand and a golden palm shadow appeared, which grabbed at Nie Tianxin's divine soul. Nie Tianxin was dumbfounded. He had never thought that Ji Tianxing would torture him so cruelly even though he already knew the answer. The humiliation of being toyed with, as well as the anger of being toyed with, instantly exploded in his soul, making him go mad with rage. Ah, Ji Tianxing, you despicable bastard, you will die a horrible death. Nie Tianxin roared at the top of his lungs. Chapter 1935. The giant golden hand flew back to Ji Tianxing with Nie Tianxin's divine soul in its hand. Ji Tianxing held the divine soul in his right hand and began to search Nie Tianxin's soul and memory with the soul-searching secret method. Huanglong Taoist didn't expect that things would turn out like this. Seeing that Ji Tianxing was holding Nie Tianxin's divine soul in silence, he couldn't help but ask, Master, Nie Tianxin has begged for mercy. Why don't you listen to his answer? Do you really know the identity of the black-robed martial sage? Ji Tianxing closed his eyes and said expressionlessly, I just guessed the answer. I can't be sure. Huanglong Taoist was even more confused. He asked, Then why don't you let him tell you the answer? Ji Tianxing said, Although Nie Tianxin begged for mercy, he still wants to try his luck. He wants to negotiate with me. Isn't that wishful thinking? I don't need him to tell me the answer. I can use the soul-searching secret method to directly search his soul and memory. Then I will know the truth. Huanglong Taoist frowned slightly and asked tentatively, Soul-searching secret method? Since Master has mastered such a wonderful technique, why don't you use it earlier? Why waste time with him? Ji Tianxing explained calmly, My divine soul is only in the tribulation realm. I can't use the soul-searching secret method on Nie Tianxian directly. First, I use the star divine fire to torture him and break his will. Then, I will severely injure his divine soul. Only then can I successfully search his soul and memory. After hearing this, Huanglong Daoist suddenly understood. He quickly cupped his hands and said, I see. Master, you are really good. As the saying goes, when the devil is 1 foot tall, the Tao is 10 feet tall. Nie Tianxian is still too inexperienced to play tricks in front of Master. Then he asked again, Master, what are you going to do with Nie Tianxian after you find out the truth? Ji Tianxing said coldly, imprison him in the star divine furnace until his divine soul is burned out by the star divine fire. Huanglong Daoist thought for a moment and said tentatively, Shizuan, this disciple has an immature suggestion. Why don't you use a secret technique to control his soul and send a message to the black-robed martial sage? After that, we will set up traps and ambushes. It is very likely that we will be able to capture that black-robed martial saint. At that time, even if we can't kill him, we can still severely injure him. Ji Tianxing thought for a moment, then shook his head lightly and said, if it were someone else, this would be a good plan. However, the black-robed martial saint was the commander of the immortal guards of the Tianju divine nation. He was martial god Tianju's trusted subordinate. This person had always been sinister and cunning, and was extremely difficult to deal with. We've already fought him, so I doubt he'll take the bait even if we use Nie Tianxian's name to send him a message. So, don't waste your energy. Huanglong Daoist's face was filled with shock, and his eyes were filled with disbelief. What? The black-robed martial saint who attacked us turned out to be the heaven and divine nations, commander of the divine guards. Yilu Shui? How could it be him? He is martial god Tianju's right-hand man, a martial saint expert who leads the divine guards. He has always been elusive. Huanglong Daoist was inexplicably shocked. He could not accept this answer, nor could he believe this result. What's more, the pillar of heaven's mountains has already withered to this point. How could he deliberately plot against us? Nie Tianxian has been in our sect for hundreds of years. Doesn't that mean that Yi Lu Shui has been targeting us for hundreds of years? Ji Tianxing finished casting the spell and slowly opened his eyes. He had already searched Nie Tianxian's soul memory and obtained the exact answer. Seeing that Huanglong Daoist was unwilling to believe it, he said calmly, when I first returned to the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains, you told me that there were many powerful forces that were targeting our sect other than the North Underworld Mountain. Among them, the most hidden and most powerful force had never been found out who it was. Now the truth is out. That force is the Heaven and Divine Nation. He raised his head to look outside the hall and said leisurely, in the past, Martial God Tai Hao and Martial God Luo Shui were indebted to me and respected me greatly. They would definitely not target the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains. Only Martial God Tianju is arrogant, and he is hostile to me. Today, the three martial gods might not be attached to worldly power and wealth anymore. Their biggest wish and goal is to leave this world and ascend to the upper world to pursue the divine Tao of immortality. Huanglong Daoist immediately understood what he meant and said, Martial God Tianju wants to know the mystery of Master's ascension. That's why he targeted the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains. He was a supreme martial god. Due to his status and face, he could not personally deal with the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains. Moreover, he was worried that Martial God Tai Hao and Martial God Luo Shui would join hands to stop him. Therefore, he gave this task to his trusted subordinate, Yi Lu Shui. That's why Yi Lu Shui sneaked into our sect to investigate the sword steal in the dojo. After the matter was exposed, he fled the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains without hesitation. Ji Tianxing nodded and said, That's right. Your guess is not far from the truth. Yi Lu Shui came for the mystery of Master's ascension. As for whether he planned it himself or was instructed by Martial God Tianju, that's unknown. Daoist Huang Long furrowed his brows tightly, his expression turning solemn. Since the black-robed martial saint is Yi Lu Shui, then we are in trouble. North Underworld Mountain wants to kill us, and Heaven and Divine Nation is also targeting us. Our sect's situation is worrying. There was something he did not say out loud. With the current strength of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, they could not even resist the North Underworld Mountain. How could they be qualified to deal with the Heaven in Divine Nation? Ji Tianqing was not worried and said calmly, "Don't worry. Today, we fought with Yi Lu Shui and alerted the enemy. This guy is cautious and will not act rashly in the short term. Next, we only need to deal with the North Underworld Mountain with all our strength." Huanglong Taoist was relieved and said, "Disciple will follow Master's instructions." Ji Tianqing thought for a moment and said, "Master will go into seclusion for a few days. Next, you have a lot of things to do. First, appease the disciples and double the cultivation resources so that everyone can improve their strength as soon as possible. In addition, you have to reorganize the 9 sects and 18 schools and establish a cooperative defense system. Let the sects strengthen their vigilance. Once they find a demon in the territory, they have to join forces to encircle and suppress it, no matter which sect or city you are from. As long as you can kill a demon, I will reward you according to your contribution. If anyone can kill a demon monarch, I will reward them with 5 million spirit stones and a supreme grade tribulation level cultivation technique. If someone can make a greater contribution, I will not only reward him with cultivation resources, but also personally guide him in martial arts." Hearing what he said, Huanglong Taoist suddenly exclaimed, "Master, isn't it too generous of you to reward people according to their contribution?" Ji Tianqing said with a serious face, "In this chaotic world, we must use extreme means to see the effect. With great rewards, there will be brave men." Huanglong Taoist hesitated and asked, "Master is a god and has the world's martial arts hidden in your heart. Rewarding cultivation methods is nothing. But our sect does not have many cultivation resources. How can we give out rewards?" Chapter 1936. Ji Tianqing reminded the Huanglong Taoist and went into seclusion in the secret chamber. Before going into secluded cultivation, he made a trip to the Star Divine Furnace underground. He suppressed Nie Tianqin's soul in the star torch and let it endure the burning and torture of the Star Divine Fire. Then, he returned to the secret chamber to cultivate in seclusion. The Huanglong Taoist also left the main hall to appease the disciples and assign tasks to the elders. After he dealt with the sect affairs of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, he had to gather the sect leaders of the 9 sects and 18 schools to formulate a joint attack and defense plan. In short, the Huanglong Taoist would be busy for the next few days. In the dimly lit secret chamber, Ji Tianqing sat on the throne and silently cultivated. There were a lot of cultivation resources in his interspatial ring, piled up into several mountains. In the next few years, he didn't have to worry about cultivation resources. Although he had set the rules of rewards based on merit, he knew very well that there were very few people who could make great contributions. He said these words just to paint a big picture for the 9 sects and 18 schools and the martial artists of the various cities. As for the specific results, he still had to observe. Unknowingly, 10 days passed in a flash. Ji Tianqing cultivated the 5th level of the Sword Soul Path and crazily improved his strength. Now, his soul and body had both reached the peak of the tribulation stage. The bucket was strong enough and big enough. He only needed to pour the water in with all his strength. After the water was full, he could naturally break through and reach a higher realm. In just 10 days, he had consumed hundreds of thousands of spirit stones, hundreds of pills, and gems. These cultivation resources were worth 3 million, and he had consumed them all in just 10 days. The price was very high. However, the result of such cultivation was outstanding. His strength had reached the peak of the 3rd level of the tribulation stage and was about to break through to the 4th level of the tribulation stage. In the depths of his soul, he had a strong feeling. The 4th heavenly tribulation was coming soon. Therefore, he ended his cultivation and entered the Star Divine Furnace underground. The surging silver sea of fire had reached a radius of 80 miles, occupying 80% of the furnace. The power of the star divine fire was even more violent, and the divine power was even purer. Ji Tianxing passed through the silver sea of fire and arrived near the torch in the middle of the furnace. The torch was empty. Nie Tianxing's soul had long since disappeared. He only persisted for a few days before he was burned to ashes by the star divine fire. How useless! He muttered in a low voice, turned around, and flew to the edge of the divine furnace. Qin Yu and the Black Dragon were both in seclusion and had no distractions. The Black Dragon acted cautiously. He was not greedy for more. He carefully absorbed the star divine fire and steadily increased his strength. It possessed the ancient divine dragon's bloodline and had mastered the dragon clan's secret technique, astral transformation art. Its strength had increased significantly. Qian Yu's cultivation method made Ji Tianxing frown. Relying on the protection of the mysterious necklace, this guy desperately absorbed the divine fire of the stars and tempered his Dharma body with no regard for his own safety. He burned himself until he was as black as charcoal, a horrible sight to behold. However, it endured the pain and converted the astral divine fire into its own magic power, rapidly increasing its strength. Ji Tianxing could sense that its strength was far beyond that of an ordinary cultivator in the second stage of the crossing calamity. It was about to reach the critical point. Apparently, it would not be long before Qian Yu underwent another tribulation. Ji Tianxing silently observed for a while. Seeing that Qian Yu was not in danger, he quietly left. He took another look at the glazed treasure bottle. Under the protection of the longevity vines, the remnant soul of the white dragon was absorbing the star, divine fire, and recovering steadily. God knew how long it would take for the remnant soul of the white dragon to fully recover. Ji Tianxing stopped and observed for a while. Then he left the divine furnace and returned to the secret chamber. He stopped cultivating and sat quietly to adjust his condition. He adjusted his condition to the peak and waited for the arrival of the heavenly tribulation. As time passed, the heavenly tribulation in his soul became more and more intense. At midnight, he had an epiphany. He knew when the heavenly tribulation would come. It would come at noon tomorrow. After confirming the time of the heavenly tribulation, Ji Tianxing began to prepare. 6 hours later, dawn arrived. At this moment, a weak streamer flew in from the sky. It entered the secret chamber and fell into Ji Tianxing's hand. Ji Tianxing immediately opened his eyes and looked down at the streamer in his hand. Inside the streamer was a half-foot-long jade slip. It was purple-black in color. It was made of the space spirit jade of the demon clan. Ji Tianxing frowned slightly. He thought for a while and understood. It must be a message from Ke. He released a wisp of divine sense and entered the jade slip. Suddenly, a picture appeared in his mind. In the dark picture, there was a dim cave. There was a stone lamp in the corner, which was shining with purple light. Ji Ke was sitting in the corner of the cave. He was wearing black armor and a loose black robe. Under the fluffy black robe, a light purple face was revealed, as well as a pair of dull eyes that were covered in bloody light. Ji Ke looked no different from the demon clan, except for his slender body. She seemed to be seriously injured. There was blood at the corner of her mouth. She looked very weak. There was a chopstick-long wound on her neck. Blood kept flowing out. However, she tried her best to support herself. She said in a weak voice, "Brother Tianxing, the demon god, created a batch of blood gods a few days ago. There are hundreds of them. The great demon sage sent 10 demon monarchs and thousands of demon clan warriors to follow the blood gods and leave the North Underworld Mountain. For half a year, the demon god has been studying how to improve the blood gods and eliminate their weaknesses. The demonic god had succeeded. The hundreds of blood gods' illusions were almost perfect killing machines, peerless weapons. Once they reach the North Underworld, the consequences will be unimaginable. The blood gods devour the blood and souls to feed the demon god. It will allow the demon god to recover to the god realm in the shortest time possible. Brother Tianxing, you must stop them. You must be careful. Nothing must happen to you." Ji Ke was already weak to begin with, and after speaking so many words intermittently, She was out of breath and gasping for breath. She seemed to be in a very dangerous situation. After saying this, she waved her hand and ended the transmission. The dark scene disappeared. Ji Tianxing gripped the transmission jade, slipped tightly. His face was full of worry. He whispered to himself, Ku is seriously injured and in a very dangerous situation. Has her identity been exposed? Impossible. She has the protection of the heavenly star chain. Her appearance and aura are demonized. There's no way she could be exposed. He was anxious and worried. He couldn't help but want to send a transmission jade slip to ask about Ji Ku's situation. However, he hesitated and dismissed the idea. He had to consider that if Ku was in danger and her identity might be exposed, then he couldn't send a transmission jade slip. At least, he couldn't send it now. That might harm Ku. Two different thoughts intertwined in his mind. He hesitated for a long time. After a long time, he suppressed the worry in his heart and calmed down to meditate and adjust his breathing. Chapter 1937. The next day at noon, the pillar of heaven's mountain was as bright as ever, surrounded by colorful clouds. Ji Tianxing walked out of the secret chamber and arrived at the vast dojo. As soon as he walked to the sword steel, the originally clear sky was filled with wind and clouds. Large gray clouds flew from all directions and gathered above the pillar of heaven's mountain. Soon, the bright sun in the sky was covered. A black cloud with a radius of hundreds of miles hung above the dojo. There were hundreds of miles of gray clouds in the sky, making the world dark. Many of the disciples felt uneasy and curious at the sight of such a drastic change in the world. Many of the disciples were awakened and gathered in groups of 3 to 5, discussing what was going on. Not long after, the black cloud formed a huge tribulation cloud vortex, flashing with all kinds of lightning. Many disciples then realized that someone was going through the tribulation. Therefore, everyone rushed to the dojo from all directions to observe the process of others going through the tribulation. In a short while, dozens of disciples gathered around the dojo. At this moment, lightning flashed in the tribulation cloud vortex, and the first bolt of lightning struck. Kaboom! Accompanied by the deafening roar of thunder, 4 different-colored lightning pillars fiercely struck Ji Tianxing, who was in the middle of the field. Gold, red, blue, and purple lightning represented the power of different attributes. They were mysterious and powerful. Just as I expected, this is my 4th tribulation. There were 4 bolts of lightning at the beginning, then 8, 16, 32. Ji Tianxing stood on the dojo and looked at the sky calmly, muttering to himself. When the lightning tore through the dark sky and struck above his head, he waved his hand and shot out a golden light. Swoosh! The sacred and dazzling golden light formed a giant vortex with a radius of 3,000 meters above his head. The 4 bolts of heavenly lightning were immediately swallowed up by the golden vortex and disappeared without a trace. The whole process was very fast, and Ji Tianxing's movements were also very relaxed. He swallowed the 4 bolts of lightning in the blink of an eye. It was easier than drinking water. Next, the tribulation cloud vortex spun faster, and the second bolt of lightning struck. Just as Ji Tianxing expected, there were 8 bolts of lightning this time, and they were still of 4 colors and attributes. Kaboom! The sound of thunder echoed in the sky, shaking hundreds of miles of land. However, when the 8 bolts of lightning struck Ji Tianxing's head, they were immediately swallowed by the golden vortex. Not a single bolt of lightning leaked out. He stood in the middle of the dojo with a calm expression, his robe as white as snow. Next, the 3rd bolt of lightning struck, and 16 bolts of lightning struck at the same time. But the result was still the golden vortex swallowed the bolts of lightning again. After the 3rd round of heavenly thunder, the tribulation cloud vortex began to change, brewing an even more powerful heavenly thunder. The disciples around the dojo had long been dumbfounded. They exclaimed and discussed among themselves. It's young Master Ji. Young Master Ji Tribulation. Oh my God. Young Master Ji, is he? Didn't he Tribulation Ji? Oh my God, am I seeing things? Tribulation, tribulation, tribulation for 2 months? Could it be that he didn't finish his tribulation last time, so he's continuing this time? Why would I have such a weird idea? Are you out of your mind? This is unbelievable. Young Master G's tribulation, lightning struck 4, 8, and 16 bolts of lightning at the same time. Isn't it terrifying that the lightning strikes would double every time? Aside from young Master G, I have never heard of anyone else tribulation G. Did the heavens change the rules of the tribulation for young Master G? Young Master G was able to neutralize such a terrifying heavenly lightning so easily. This is simply unbelievable. No wonder he is the successor of our founder, Kenshin. He is a rare talent. With young Master G inheriting our founder's martial skills, our Pillar of Heaven's mountain will prosper. Yes, with young Master G's speed of growth, he will be able to break through to the martial sage realm soon. By then, our sect will have 2 martial sages. More than 100 Tribulation Cloud Vortex disciples gathered around the dojo and discussed excitedly. They were excited and excited. Ji Tianxing's strength and talent made everyone see hope for the Pillar of Heaven's mountain. The disciples were more united and had greater hopes for the Pillar of Heaven's mountain. They were also more loyal. This was what Ji Tianxing wanted to see. It was also the reason why he had gone through the tribulation in front of everyone. After a while, the Tribulation Cloud Vortex completed its transformation and struck down the 4th bolt of lightning. Kaboom! The sound of thunder shook the clouds and reverberated in the sky, causing the Pillar of Heaven's mountain to shake. 32 bolts of lightning that were 1,000 feet long came down from the Tribulation Cloud Vortex. They were arranged in a mysterious array and struck down on Ji Tianxing. Every bolt of lightning was colorful. Other than gold, red, blue, and purple, there was a 5th color, black. The disciples around the dojo had never seen black lightning before, and they all exclaimed in shock. However, Ji Tianxing knew very well that black lightning was the rarest and the most terrifying type of lightning. Black lightning represented annihilation. He frowned slightly and raised his arms with a grave expression. He waved his palms, and sword radiance filled the sky. Shush, shush, shush. A total of 49 giant golden swords formed a sword array and flew into the sky, striking down on the 32 bolts of lightning. The lightning and sword radiance collided, creating a loud sound that shook the universe and splashing out endless dazzling light. Kaboom! The 5-colored lightning and the giant golden swords shattered at the same time, turning into millions of light fragments that fell from the sky like a colorful rain. Ji Tianxing defeated the lightning and stood in the middle of the dojo unscathed. Next, the 5th and 6th bolts of lightning struck down. 64 and 128 bolts of lightning struck down from the Tribulation Cloud Vortex. The destructive lightning struck down and flooded the dojo within 100 miles, turning the entire dojo into a world of lightning. The disciples around the dojo were also shocked by the terrifying power. They were so scared that their faces turned pale and they retreated in fear. Finally, the 6th bolt of lightning ended and the Tribulation Cloud Vortex changed again. Ji Tianxing stood in the sky calmly and looked up at the Tribulation Cloud Vortex, waiting quietly. 100 breaths later, the Tribulation Cloud Vortex completed its transformation and turned into a thick blood-red color. The 7th bolt of lightning was the inner demon tribulation. A 1,000-foot-long blood-red bolt of lightning struck down and turned into a huge blood-red light ball, enveloping Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing was fearless and calmly accepted the test of the inner demon tribulation. The 7th inner demon tribulation and the 8th tribulation of wind and fire were no longer a challenge for him. He was most looking forward to and curious about the last bolt of lightning. The 3 heavenly tribulations he had experienced before were the 7 emotions tribulation, reincarnation tribulation, and space-time tribulation. Today was the 4th heavenly tribulation. Chapter 1938. The dark red ball of light enveloped Ji Tianxing for an entire hour. The inner demon tribulation this time, was exceptionally long. Tianxing endured all kinds of tests in the inner demon dream. However, after an hour, he still passed through without any mishaps. The blood-red ball of light gradually dissipated. He also opened his eyes, exuding a powerful and majestic aura. Every inner demon tribulation was an extremely dangerous tribulation. The slightest mistake could turn one into ashes. However, after he passed the tribulation, he would face his heart and be able to see the memories in the depths of his soul. Those were imprints that could not be erased by time and reincarnation. Tianxing looked up at the tribulation cloud vortex high in the sky, and the corners of his mouth curled up into a sneer. It seemed to be contempt and also seemed to be mocking. There was also a hint of frivolity and arrogance. No one knew what he had experienced. No one knew what he was feeling at this moment. Kaboom! Thunder exploded, and the 8th heavenly lightning descended. The 1,000-feet-long 5-colored heavenly lightning struck Tianxing like a divine dragon descending into the world. The 5-colored lightning fire that illuminated the world enveloped Tianxing and burned him crazily. He stood in the air with a calm expression, enduring the torture of the heavenly wind, astral fire, and lightning. He once again used the tribulation of wind and fire to temper his body. His body had already reached the peak of the tribulation transcendent stage and was extremely close to the limit. However, he was still unwilling to give up any opportunity to temper his body, because he knew that the true limit was there would never be a limit. 1,000 years ago, he had traveled in the dragon realm for many years, increasing his extensive experience and knowledge. He knew that among the tens of thousands of races in the universe, the dragon clan had the strongest physical body and the most powerful divine ability. In a fair battle with the same strength and realm, almost no race could surpass the dragon clan in combat strength. Among the dragon clan's secret techniques, there was a strange and unconventional ultimate skill that could allow one to become a god with their physical body. Without cultivating martial arts or dharma spells, one could also reach the god realm by continuously tempering their body with various methods and infinitely increasing their physical strength. Moreover, this kind of powerhouse whose physical body had become a god could easily crush opponents of the same realm. In his previous life, Tianxing had been inspired by this and had also tried to cultivate this technique. Unfortunately, the effects were not great. It was far inferior to his cultivation of the sword Dao, which allowed him to increase his strength faster. However, things were different now. He had been reborn and had experienced 9 heavenly tribulations. He wanted to use the terrifying power of the heavenly tribulation to refine his physical body, continuously excavate his own potential, and expand his limits. Although he was the reincarnation of Kenshin, he would not follow the same old path. He wanted to make up for his regrets and try a cultivation method that he had never tried before. He wanted to create a brand new path of martial arts. Unknowingly, another 2 hours passed. Tianxing endured all kinds of torment and finally succeeded in tempering his body, causing the strength of his body to double. He unearthed even more potential and pushed his limits even further. After the great tribulation of wind and fire dissipated, the tribulation cloud vortex churned violently again, and the 9th heavenly thunder descended. Boom! Following a thunderous roar that resounded throughout the universe, a huge 5-colored light beam came crashing down. At that moment, the entire pillar of heaven's mountains was illuminated by the 5-colored light, turning into a dazzling world of light. Countless disciples could not open their eyes because of the blinding light. It was as if they had been blinded and could not see anything. After the dazzling 5-colored light beams struck Tianxing, it turned into a ball of light that was dozens of miles wide and enveloped him. After a long time, the 5-colored light that illuminated the world slowly dissipated. Only a ball of light with a radius of 25 miles was left floating quietly in the sky above the training ground. Everyone was bewildered. They were shocked and puzzled as they whispered to each other. No one knew what was hidden in the 9th heavenly thunder. At this moment, Ji Tianxing was trapped in the endless void, standing on a huge disk. This five-colored disk array was thousands of miles wide, like a lone island in the dark void. The multicolored light was the majestic five elements spiritual qi, which circulated endlessly. Ji Tianxing stood in the middle of the five elements disk array, calmly observing the situation around him, wondering what kind of test this was. The five elements spirit qi formed the disk array and hung alone in the void. Other than that, there's nothing else. Could this test be the five elements tribulation? As Ji Tianxing pondered, he stepped over the five elements disk array and flew toward the edge. Soon, he flew to the edge of the disk array and stood still, looking at the void in front of him and observing carefully. There was no temperature, air, or spirit qi in the dark void, and there were no living things. There was only endless coldness and silence, as well as terrifying void storms, turbulence, and black holes. Even martial sages could not travel through the void, let alone stay in the void for a long time. Otherwise, they would lose their lives. Only when one reached the martial god realm would one be qualified to travel through the void and cross the entire star region. Even if one encountered a void storm or turbulence, one would be qualified to fight back and have a chance to escape. Ji Tianxing relied on his strong physical body and tried to step into the void. He wanted to see if there was anything else in the void other than the five elements disk array. However, as soon as he stepped into the void, he was bounced back by an invisible divine power and flew hundreds of feet away. He was unwilling to give up and tried a few more times, but all of them ended in failure. Moreover, he was injured by the invisible divine power and blood flowed out of his mouth and nose. There was no doubt that he was trapped in the five elements disk array and could not leave at all, unless he could resolve the five elements tribulation. He calmed down and observed carefully. Soon, he discovered that there was a faint light in the depths of the void. He quickly performed the god's secret skill, and his eyes turned golden as he stared into the depths of the void. After observing for a while, he realized that the light was the pillar of Heaven's mountain. He could see the scene at the peak of the pillar of Heaven's mountain. There were many palaces and mansions, and many disciples were watching and discussing at the edge of the dojo. Ji Tianxing frowned and thought for a while. He immediately understood. I'm trapped in the five elements disk array. The outside world is the peak of the pillar of Heaven's mountain, and there is an impassable void in between. If I can't resolve the five elements tribulation, I will be trapped here and may even die. Only by crossing the void can I leave the five elements disk array and return to the peak of the pillar of Heaven's mountain. But how can I resolve the five elements tribulation? How can I cross the void? Ji Tianxing looked at the scene in the depths of the void, and then looked at the five elements disk array under his feet. He frowned and pondered. After a while, an idea flashed through his mind, and he suddenly had an idea. That's right. The power of the five elements is the source of all things in the universe. I have not recovered to the immortal state, so I can't create things out of nothing. But I can use the power of the five elements disk array to create real mountains, rivers, flowers, and trees to fill the dark void. Chapter 1939. Ji Tianxing no longer hesitated when he thought of a way to resolve the five elements tribulation. He flew to the center of the five elements formation plate and sat cross-legged in it. He started to cast spells with both hands. Under his control, the five elements spirit qi in the five colors formation plate started to flow faster. Pillars of five-colored light flew out and circled around his body like swimming dragons. Vast heaven and earth, sun and moon, five elements extremes, creation and rebirth. Ji Tianxing shouted with a serious face. He waved his hand, and hundreds of five colors light flew into the void at the edge of the formation plate. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. When the five colors light landed in the void, a magical change immediately occurred. The dark yellow earth spirit qi quickly condensed into yellow soil and rocks. It spread in all directions and formed a vast land. The power of the five elements was activated. Fire, wood, earth, and became an even more turbulent earth spirit qi. The dark yellow land grew wildly and grew at an extremely fast speed. It formed a mound and then a mountain peak. Ji Tianxing continued to cast spells and controlled the power of the five elements formation plate to continuously inject it into the void. The small mountain that was 100 feet tall also grew rapidly and became a more majestic mountain peak. It also spread into the depths of the void. At the same time, green grass, vines, and saplings began to appear on the bare mountain peak. They grew at an incredible speed. Time passed silently, and 2 hours passed very quickly. In the void at the edge of the formation plate, the original mountain peak had become a lush green mountain range. It extended for hundreds of miles and continued to spread into the depths of the void. Ji Tianxing was still sitting in the middle of the formation plate. He waved his hand and cast spells with a serious expression to control the five elements spirit chi. The power of the five elements formation plate was endless, as if it would never be exhausted. After 6 hours, the mountain range had grown to more than 400 miles. It was only 300 miles away from the light in the depths of the void. Ji Tianxing cast spells continuously for 6 hours. He had been creating things out of thin air, as if he was creating a miracle. His divine soul had been greatly consumed, and his expression was already somewhat tired. Fine beads of sweat had also appeared on his forehead. Unknowingly, another 4 hours passed. The majestic Green Mountain Range had stretched for more than 800 miles. It finally crossed the dark void and came into contact with the light. Ji Tianxing breathed a sigh of relief and slowly ended the spell. Chua! The five elements array disk lit up with a dazzling brilliance and turned into a huge vortex, enveloping Ji Tianxing. The majestic five elements spiritual chi surged into his body like a torrential flood. Without a doubt, he had successfully resolved the five elements tribulation. This was a reward from the heavenly Tao. He accepted the five elements spiritual chi with open arms and converted it into magic power, quickly increasing his strength. After a short 15 minutes, his body was filled with the five elements spiritual chi. Even if he compressed his magic power by 5 times, he was still unable to contain any more magic power. He had already reached his limit. However, he had only devoured 20% of the spiritual chi. The remaining 80% of the spiritual chi would be wasted. Thus, he used his mind to control the heaven-mending pearl in his mind and crazily devoured the five elements spiritual chi. This method was indeed effective. The tiny heaven-mending bead was like a bottomless pit. Very quickly, it devoured all of the five elements' spiritual energy. The heaven-mending pearl became even more dazzling, and its power increased by several times. However, Ji Tianxing could feel that the five elements spiritual chi was just an appetizer to the heaven-mending pearl. Even if there were 10 or 20 times more spiritual chi, it would still be able to devour it. The five-colored array disk gradually disappeared. Ji Tianxing also turned around and left in satisfaction. He stepped onto the majestic mountain range and walked along the lush mountain range towards the depths of the void. After 100 breaths of time, he reached the end of the mountain range and stepped into the light. Shwa! With a flash of light, he seemed to have passed through a light curtain or a five-colored mirror. He left the world of the void and returned to the peak of the pillar of heaven's mountains. He appeared in the sky above the training hall, safe and sound. His strength had increased by 2 times. At the same time, the five-colored light in the sky dissipated. The five elements tribulation had completely ended. The tribulation cloud vortex high in the sky also turned into a sacred golden light that descended from the sky and enveloped Ji Tianxing's figure. His body had already accumulated too much five elements spiritual chi and could not contain more magic power for the time being. However, this sacred golden light was a special kind of divine power. After entering his body, it poured into his divine soul and quickly strengthened his divine soul. In just 100 breaths of time, his divine soul had expanded by 3 times, and his sea of consciousness had also become wider. After the strengthening of his divine soul, it had also reached the limit which was just right for his magic power and physical body. Moreover, the benefits of the strengthening of his divine soul were obvious. His divine sense was more powerful and could cover a radius of 500 miles. It was meticulous. His sea of consciousness could contain more information. His aptitude and comprehension had also improved a lot. His reaction was also faster. All in all, Ji Tianqing successfully passed the heavenly tribulation and reached the fourth stage of the tribulation stage. His strength had increased by more than 3 times compared to before. When he refined the sacred golden light and opened his eyes shot out a sharp golden light. His whole body also exuded a majestic and domineering aura. The disciples around the training hall were still immersed in shock, surprise, and discussion. Feeling Ji Tianqing's majestic and domineering aura, everyone's body trembled. Their hearts were filled with deep reverence, and they naturally bowed down to salute him. Congratulations to young Master Ji for successfully passing the heavenly tribulation. Congratulations to young Master Ji for achieving great success. Countless people saluted in unison and shouted with heartfelt admiration. Ji Tianqing looked around with a majestic gaze, then withdrew his gaze, stepped across the sky, and left the training hall. Under the gaze of everyone, he returned to the Heaven Pillar Palace. He had to meditate for 2 days to refine the 5 elements spiritual chi stored in his body and stabilize his martial arts foundation. Otherwise, when the spiritual chi stored in his body reached the limit, his combat power would be greatly reduced, and he might explode at any time. After he left, the disciples in the training hall were still unwilling to leave. They still gathered in groups of 3 to 5, discussing what had happened before. What they saw today had refreshed everyone's understanding of the heavenly tribulation. It was really an eye-opener. Many disciples were sighing with emotion. To be able to witness such a unique and powerful heavenly tribulation with their own eyes was definitely the greatest fortune in their lives. To be able to watch a monstrous genius like Ji Tianqing undergo the heavenly tribulation and observe the process clearly was not only a blessing, but also a great help and inspiration. Everyone was full of admiration for Ji Tianqing, and they were all looking forward to him breaking through to the martial saint realm and taking over the position of sect master. At that time, Tianju Mountain would have 2 martial saints overseeing it, as well as the #1 genius since ancient times. Tianju Mountain would definitely become famous throughout the Xinwu continent and create a new era of glory. With such feelings and expectations, everyone was full of hope and longing for Tianju Mountain's future. Chapter 1940. 2 days passed in the blink of an eye. Ji Tianqing had been meditating in the secret chamber for 2 days. He had already converted all the spiritual energy in his body. His martial arts foundation had been stabilized, and his strength had also increased steadily. He had reached his peak state. That night, after he finished his cultivation, he ordered Ji Bai to send a message to the Huanglong Taoist for an audience. After a while, the Huanglong Taoist came to the secret chamber. Disciple greets Master. Congratulations on successfully passing the tribulation. Your strength has increased by another level. The Huanglong Taoist cupped his hands and said respectfully. Ji Tianqing raised his hand, indicating for him to stand up and speak. He asked, "You have been busy with the mission for the past 10 days. How is the result?" The Huanglong Taoist showed a gratified expression and reported, "Master, don't worry. Things are going well. This disciple has already pacified the other disciples and doubled the amount of cultivation resources. In addition, Master has passed the tribulation in front of everyone. The disciples are even more excited and in high spirits. Now, the disciples are very united. They are all looking forward to the sect's development and revival of its glory. As for the 9 sects and 18 schools, I have also gathered the leaders of the sects and made them rules and agreements. After 2 rounds of negotiations, the sect have accepted the agreement to cooperate in attack and defense. In addition, Master said that there will be rewards based on merit. This has greatly boosted the morale of the sections. They are quite interested. After listening to the Huanglong Taoist report, Ji Tianqing was relieved. He said in a serious tone, Huang Long, you will stay in Tianzhu Mountain. You must be strict and protect the safety of the sect. I have to go out to do something. I am afraid that I will only be back in a month or two. The Huanglong Taoist was startled. He asked doubtfully, Master, the situation in Tianzhu Mountain has already stabilized. What else do you have to do? Why do you have to go out for so long? Ji Tianxing explained in a low voice, the North Underworld Mountain has created another batch of Blood God's illusions. They are perfect, peerless, murderous weapons. They are rushing to the battlefield in the north of the Luo Shui God Nation. Once those Blood God's illusions join the battlefield, they will definitely cause a huge wave of blood and create a shocking tragedy. I must personally take action and try to kill that batch of Blood God sons. I can't let them rush to the northern border battlefield. When Huanglong Taoist heard this, he immediately shook his head and said worriedly, Master, are you going to act alone? Absolutely not. It was too dangerous. Moreover, the Luo Shui Divine Nation is powerful, and they will find a way to resolve the crisis. There is no need for you to do anything. You only need to send this news to the Luo Shui God Nation. Why do you have to take the risk yourself? In short, this disciple does not agree to let you go unless you let this disciple follow and protect you. Ji Tianxing looked at him with a solemn expression and said in a dignified tone, Huang Long, wasn't the lesson from before enough? How can you and I leave at the same time? Someone had to stay behind to guard Tianzhu Mountain. Moreover, I know the Blood God the best. Only I can kill that group of Blood God's illusions. The Luo Shui Divine Nation was indeed powerful, but they were too busy defending themselves and were unable to completely destroy the Blood God. We can't just sit by and watch. We have to attack the demons from both sides at the right time. If the Luo Shui God Nation were to fall, the Luo Shui God Nation would not be the only one to suffer. The demon's next target would be our Tianzhu Mountain. I believe you understand the principle of being cold without the lips. Huanglong Taoist hesitated for a moment and, still unwillingly persuaded, Master, this disciple understands what you mean, but this disciple is really worried about you going alone. Without waiting for him to finish, Ji Tianxing waved his hand and interrupted him. He said resolutely, Master has already made up his mind. You don't have to say any more. Huanglong Taoist sighed silently. He could only bow and say, This disciple understands. Master, please rest assured that this disciple will protect the Tianzhu Mountain without any mistakes. However, Master, please be extra careful when you act and ensure your own safety. Master understands. Ji Tianxing nodded and waved his hand, indicating for him to leave. Huanglong Taoist bowed and left the secret room. Ji Tianxing left the Tianzhu Palace alone and came to the center of the training hall. The burial of heaven flew out from the sword steel and turned into a black light that entered his arm. Then, he flew into the sky alone and left the Tianzhu Mountain. As for the onyx dragon and Qianyu, they were still cultivating in the star furnace. After all, they were about to undergo their tribulations, so cultivating in the Tianzhu Mountain was the right thing to do. After leaving the Tianzhu Mountain, Ji Tianxing sped through the sky and headed east. A few million kilometers to the southeast, past the 100,000 mountains, was the border of the Luo Shui God Nation. 3 million kilometers to the east was the Dark North Mountain where the demons resided. Ji Tianxing estimated that by the time he reached the vicinity of the Dark North Mountain, the Blood God signs would have already left and would be on their way to the Luo Shui God Nation. Thus, he sped through the sky while taking out a map to check the route. On the specially made golden paper map, the layout of the Shenwu continent was marked in detail. This was especially true for the 3 divine kingdoms, Dark North Mountain, the Ruins of God, and the Tianzhu Mountain. The distance from the Dark North Mountain to the northern border of the Luo Shui God Nation was roughly 3 million kilometers. He would definitely pass by Whitebone Mountain, Myriad Poison Valley, Dark Cloud Mountain, and Soulbreak Cliff. Ji Tianxing memorized the route and silently calculated. With the Blood God sign speed, they should reach the Dark Cloud Mountain in 20 days. I'll be there by then as well. If they're traveling on a tribulation-grade flying ship, they'll definitely be near Soulbreak Cliff in 20 days. If that's the case, I'll rush to Soulbreak Cliff to kill them. After making up his mind, Ji Tianqing put away the map and rushed east with all his might. For the next 20 days, Ji Tianqing traveled at full speed. During this time, he passed through the 100,000 mountains and traveled more than 5 million kilometers. Although this vast and desolate mountain range hid countless vicious beasts, there was no lack of peak tribulation-grade powerhouses among them. However, his speed was too fast, and his aura was concealed very well. Ordinary beasts would find it difficult to detect him. Even if some peak tribulation-grade beasts could sense his aura, they would not dare to attack him rashly, let alone catch up to him. The journey was daunting but not dangerous. It was safe and smooth. On the evening of the 21st day, when the sun was setting, Ji Tianqing finally arrived at Soulbreak Cliff. Soulbreak Cliff was one of the most dangerous forbidden areas in the 100,000 mountains. Almost no martial artists or adventurers would come here. It was only a few 100,000 kilometers away from the northern border of the Luo Shui divine nation. Ji Tianqing arrived near Soulbreak Cliff and slowed down his flying speed. He used the chaotic heaven's secret technique to hide his aura. He traveled through the clouds and silently observed the situation below. He saw undulating mountain ranges in all directions. In the dark green mountain range, there were peaks that were thousands of feet tall every few meters. The peaks were steep and straight. The peaks were covered by white clouds and thick fog, and they were faintly discernible. The mountains were covered by thick clouds, and the light was rather dim. The setting sun could barely shine on them. The mountains were abnormally quiet, and it was a little strange. As for the famous Soulbreak Cliff, it was, of course, a cliff that was tens of thousands of feet deep. From the front, it was a towering mountain that was 20,000 feet tall. Chapter 1941. In Ji Tianqing's opinion, the Broken Soul Cliff's name was very intimidating. However, it was probably just an undeserved reputation. This kind of forbidden area was either occupied by powerful, ferocious beasts, contained hundreds of deadly poisons, or had the power of a natural array. There were all kinds of forbidden areas in the world, and there were only a few possibilities. For ordinary martial artists, the Broken Soul Cliff was a terrifying, forbidden area of death. However, for him, it was like walking on flat ground. He quietly came to the sky above the Broken Soul Cliff, hid in the thick clouds, and silently used the Celestial Chaos secret technique. In the blink of an eye, his body became transparent and disappeared into the sky. He merged with the heaven and earth and explored everything around the Broken Soul Cliff. Soon, he figured out the situation. Haha! As I expected, there are two ferocious beasts on the mountain, and there's a natural array power hidden in the cliff, as well as highly toxic miasma and poisonous fog. As for the bottom of the cliff, it's actually blocked by a layer of invisible force, and even my divine sense can't penetrate it. These thoughts flashed through Ji Tianqing's mind. He immediately ended the spell and revealed his true body. Swoosh! He appeared on the peak of the towering mountain and looked down at the bottomless abyss below. He frowned with a serious expression. How interesting! Not only does this Broken Soul Cliff contain the three kinds of dangers that I guessed, but it also has such a mysterious array power. My divine sense can't penetrate it. Could be a saint-level array? Anyway, the demon warriors and the blood god haven't arrived yet. I'll check the situation first. Ji Tianqing made up his mind to enter the Broken Soul Cliff and find out what was going on. However, just as he was about to leave the peak, a low roar came from the forest behind him. Roar! The muffled roar reverberated through the mountain peak, causing the mountain peak to tremble and the forest to sway. Two dangerous auras came and were approaching an extremely fast speed. Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows, and murderous intent flashed in his eyes. He muttered to himself, "No matter how small the trouble is, it's still trouble. I have to get rid of it first." After saying that, he slowly turned and looked at the forest not far away. Two gigantic beasts that were as sturdy as small mountains flew out of the dense, dark green forest. Both beasts were over 1,000 feet tall. They were grayish-brown in color and covered in hard scales. They look a little like giant apes, with thick limbs and long tails. Their heads were large and square, and their scarlet eyes were like flames. However, they had black wings on their backs and dark red lava cracks all over their bodies, making them look like rare earth dragon lava beasts. As the two giant beasts crossed the forest, the surrounding towering trees were shattered into pieces and scattered on the ground. Dong, dong, dong. Heavy footsteps could be heard, shaking the entire mountain peak. The two of them walked until they were about 100 feet away from Ji Tianxing and stopped. They looked down at him with bloodthirsty eyes. Without a doubt, these were two ferocious beasts with violent and bloodthirsty temperaments. Their strength had also reached the 4th level of the Tribulation Transcendence realm, and they were not to be trifled with. If an ordinary martial artist came here and encountered these two giant beasts, the only outcome would be death. They wouldn't even have the chance to escape. Only famous martial lords had a chance of survival. The two giant beasts spread out and surrounded Ji Tianxing from the left and right. Their eyes revealed ridicule. In their eyes, Ji Tianxing was so weak that he would definitely die. Before killing Ji Tianxing, they wanted to tease him and have some fun. After all, very few people passed by the Breaking Soul Cliff. Even if they did, they would avoid it. Ji Tianxing glanced at the two giant beasts expressionlessly. He didn't waste any time and directly attacked. He stretched out his right hand, and a black light flashed in his palm. The sword of Burial of Heaven appeared in his palm. Whoosh! He held the sword of Burial of Heaven in his right hand and swung it at the giant beast on the left. A crescent-shaped sword light about 100 feet wide appeared. The sword of Burial of Heaven's 9 swords. The sudden silver-white sword light was condensed by the divine star fire. It was as bright and flawless as a crescent moon. The dark sky and the mountain peak were illuminated by the silver-white moonlight. The speed of the sword light was too fast. It was so fast that the giant beast didn't have time to dodge, and its thick neck was cut. Bang! With a muffled sound, the 10-foot-thick grayish-brown neck was directly cut off by the sword light. A huge head flew into the sky. A dark red column of blood spurted out from the neck like magma. With just one sword, the giant beast in the 4th stage of the tribulation stage was instantly killed. Plop! The hill-like body fell to the ground with a bang. The huge head also hit the ground, making a muffled sound. The ground trembled a few times, and a large cloud of dust splashed out. Whoosh! A dark red, divine soul flew out of the head and fled down the mountain in horror. However, Ji Tianxing waved his right hand and swung out another sword light. Bang! The dark red soul was hit by the sword light and exploded on the spot, turning into a large cloud of red mist. The sword of Burial of Heaven burst out with an invisible devouring power and immediately swallowed the red mist. For it, the souls of tribulation stage, powerhouses, and demonic beasts were also good nourishment. The other giant beast was scared silly by this series of changes before it could attack. It obviously didn't expect that the seemingly weak, white-robed human would be so powerful that he could kill its companion with just 2 swords. It was scared out of its wits and trembled all over. Knowing that it had provoked a strong enemy that it shouldn't have, it didn't hesitate to turn around and fly away after coming to its senses. It flapped its black wings desperately, bursting out dazzling flames. It used the teleportation technique to escape from the Broken Soul Cliff. However, Ji Tianxing was already ready to attack. He swung out a golden sword light. Heaven-breaking sword. The 100-foot-long giant sword flew out like a thunderbolt tearing the sky, illuminating the mountain peak brightly. Bang! Just as the giant beast was about to teleport, it was hit by the giant's sword and made a muffled sound. The sword light passed through its body and flew dozens of miles away before dissipating. A dark red line of blood extended from the top of its head down, along its neck and back to its legs. Then its body split open from the middle and split into 2 halves with a bang, spraying out a large amount of blood. Plop! The 2 halves of the corpse fell to the ground, causing the earth to tremble, but there was no more sound. Ji Tianxing's sword not only destroyed its physical body, but also accurately shattered its soul. After easily dealing with the two giant beasts, Ji Tianxing threw a few balls of star divine fire on the giant beast's corpse. Immediately, the giant beast's corpse burned and was quickly burned into nothingness by the star divine fire. In this way, there wouldn't be any corpses or bloodstains left on the mountain peak to avoid attracting more demonic beasts. If the demon race warriors and the blood god's son passed by, they wouldn't notice anything unusual and would take precautions in advance. After destroying the corpses, Ji Tianxing held the sword of burial of heaven and stepped into the bottomless abyss. He stepped in the air, passed through the dark clouds and poisonous fog, and flew toward the bottom of the cliff. His body had been refined hundreds of times and was already immune to all poisons. It was comparable to the body of a martial sage. The poisonous miasma and fog below the broken soul cliff couldn't threaten him at all. Even the invisible, strangling power released by the natural formation below the cliff was ignored by him. Chapter 1942. After a while, Ji Tianxing came to the bottom of the cliff. It was dark all around, and the air was cold and still. It was filled with the aura of death. There was a faint light above his head. However, as the sun set, the faint light also disappeared. Ji Tianxing held the sword of burial of heaven and stood in the dark sky. He looked at his feet with his golden eyes. It was dark, and there seemed to be nothing under his feet. In fact, there was a layer of invisible force floating in the air like a membrane. This membrane was incomparably sturdy and dangerous. It contained a destructive power. Before he knew what was going on, Ji Tianxing did not dare to touch the membrane in case he was in danger. He used the God's Eye secret skill to observe the invisible membrane. The scene in front of him quickly changed. He saw through the disguise and saw the essence of the force. Tens of thousands of black lines were floating in the pitch-black sky, intertwining with each other. Every black line was as thin as a hair, but it contained the power to tear everything apart. It was chilling. Hundreds of millions of black lines were intertwined and mixed together. It was like a huge protective net in the abyss. Ji Tianxing could vaguely feel that the aura of those black lines was somewhat familiar. He released his spiritual consciousness to check it out. However, when his spiritual consciousness touched the black lines, it was cut off and his spiritual soul felt a sharp pain. Of course, this pain was nothing to him. He frowned and thought for a while. Then, he came to a conclusion. Understand now, is the power of the void. He had already experienced the power of the void countless times. Even a martial sage could only stay in the void for a short time and could not survive for a long time. The net formed by the power of the void was more like a wall of death than a protective net. Once a martial artist below the martial sage realm touched the empty space net, he would be sliced into pieces and would die without leaving any trace behind. No wonder the Broken Soul Cliff is said to be so scary. No matter how strong the adventurers are, they do not dare to come here. Any cultivator below the martial saint realm who comes into contact with this void net will not be able to survive and will definitely die. Ji Tianxing frowned and muttered to himself in a low voice. At this moment, Burial of Heaven's voice sounded in his mind. This is just a cliff. Why would the power of the void appear and form a net? Aren't you going to go through this net and find out what's going on below? Ji Tianxing thought for a moment and nodded. You're right. I also thought of this problem just now. Why would a void net appear here for no reason? Looking at the way this void net is condensed, it doesn't seem to be controlled by someone. It seems to be formed naturally and repaired by the heavenly Tao. The so-called restoration of the heavenly Tao, only deity realm powerhouses understood what it meant. To put it simply, this world was enveloped by the heavenly Tao and operated under the will of the heavenly Tao. If a martial god realm expert fought and broke the sky, creating a spatial crack, revealing a gap in the void, in that case, the spatial rift would not continue to expand, and it would naturally heal under the power of the heavenly Tao. It was because of this that this world could exist for a long time. Otherwise, after the countless battles of the gods over the past tens of thousands of years, this world would have been shattered and completely destroyed by the gods. Burial of Heaven was silent for a moment before it said, "Since the heavenly Tao repaired it, it means that there's something strange about this place. There's most likely a spatial crack under the void net that connects to the void outside. As long as it's a spatial crack, it either hides a huge secret or an opportunity, or it's a peerless danger." Ji Tianxing nodded and said calmly, "With our knowledge and means, even walking the void is not a problem. However, I have to set up some ambushes and traps to deal with the demon warriors and the blood god. As for the situation under the void net, it won't be too late to investigate after I've dealt with the blood god." Burial of Heaven agreed. "That's good. Let's get down to business." After a while, it asked again, "What kind of trap are you going to set? If it's some kind of big formation, I'm afraid it won't work. Soul-breaking cliff is notorious. The demon warriors and the blood god won't look for trouble and will definitely take a detour." Ji Tianxing's lips curled into a playful smile. He asked with his spiritual sense, "Against a large number of demon warriors and the blood god, of course a formation is the most effective. I can't kill them one by one, right? Ordinary formations can't be moved, so it's difficult to be effective. But don't forget, I once used a kind of formation that can be moved." With his reminder, Burial of Heaven recalled for a moment and suddenly understood. "Are you talking about the dragon elephant heavenly seal? That ancient formation that uses one's self as a carrier?" Ji Tianxing nodded and said, "Yes, it's the dragon elephant heavenly seal, a unique secret technique of the dragon race." Speaking of the dragon elephant heavenly seal, he couldn't help but smile, his eyes filled with memories. Among the thousands of races in the universe, the dragon race is the most eccentric. They're proficient in all kinds of self-abuse and self-harm secret techniques, but they're also unreasonably powerful. They crazily temper their dragon bodies and use self-harm to become gods. They use their own dragon blood to water spiritual herbs, use their own dragon bones to refine pills, or refine divine artifacts and magic treasures. They also use themselves as formation discs to set up formations, use their own dragon scales to refine talismans or armor. I even suspect that those old dragons who have lived for tens of thousands of years will be so bored that they'll slice themselves up for fun. Speaking of this, Ji Tianxing couldn't help but laugh, his face full of ridicule. Burial of Heaven was silent for a moment, then replied seriously, "I think it's very possible." Cough, cough. Ji Tianxing pretended to cough twice and ended the topic. "We're off topic. I'll set up the dragon elephant heavenly seal first. When I form the formation myself, I'll be the best bait. I'll definitely be able to trap and kill those blood gods." Burial of Heaven reminded in a serious tone, "This is very dangerous. Once you can't hold on, you'll die on the spot. You have to think carefully. Don't worry, I have the chaotic heaven secret technique and the heaven mending pearl as a carrier. There's no danger at all." Ji Tianxing waved his hand confidently and said, "I'll set up the formation, and you protect me. I hope that those demons will come later and give me enough time to complete the dragon elephant heavenly seal." After saying that, Ji Tianxing flew out of the broken soul cliff and landed on the peak of the mountain. He sat cross-legged on the ground, closed his eyes, and began to cast the technique. He waved his palm, and a five-colored brilliance filled the sky, scattering into heaven and earth. Burial of Heaven flew high into the sky, secretly monitoring the movements in the surroundings. The dragon elephant heavenly seal secret technique was very strange. It required one to use one's body as a formation disc to construct the network of the formation between heaven and earth, and then form a heavenly seal formation. Once the formation was formed, Ji Tianxing would be a moving formation. Wherever he went, the surrounding 100 miles would be covered by the formation. Of course, to complete the dragon elephant heavenly seal, one must have powerful magic power, a sturdy and strong enough body, and one must also merge with heaven and earth. Chapter 1943. Deep into the night, north of Broken Soul Cliff, about 200 kilometers away, a black flying ship that was 300 meters long was speeding through the night sky. The flying ship's shape was somewhat strange and sinister. The body of the ship was completely black, and many sinister and terrifying demon patterns and symbols were engraved on it. At the bow of the ship stood a mast that was more than 100 meters tall. It was actually made of gray bones, and a flag hung from the top. The flag was engraved with a sinister demon pattern and a complicated skull symbol. It was the insignia of Dark North Mountain. The flying ship was like a ghost, flying through the sky at an extremely fast speed, but it was also silent. This flying ship was a high-grade tribulation magic treasure. The interior of the flying ship was very spacious, and it was divided into several distinct regions. Near the bow of the ship was a heavily guarded secret room. The formation that controlled the flying ship was in this secret room. Only the leading demon monarchs were qualified to enter. Outside the secret room was a dark passage, and on both sides were tightly shut iron doors. Behind each iron door was a secret room. There were a total of 100 secret rooms, and each one was occupied by a blood god. At the end of the passage was a spacious circular hall. The hall was dimly lit with purple light, and it was used to discuss matters and issue orders. After passing through the hall to the stern of the ship, there was another straight and wide passage. There were 20 secret rooms lined up on both sides of the passage, and each room housed 50 elite demon race warriors. The flying ship had been flying for more than 20 days. Over 100 blood gods and over 1,000 demon race warriors had been cultivating in the secret rooms, conserving their strength. At this moment, in the secret room at the bow of the ship, several demon monarchs were discussing matters. A demon race man wearing a purple robe and a blood-red cloak was sitting on a throne made of white bones. Dark purple light shone on him, and half of his body and face were hidden in the shadows, making it difficult to see him clearly. The other 5 demon race experts stood around the throne, all of them wearing black armor and purple cloaks. There were men and women, old and young, and their appearances were all different. Some were like giant beasts, some were only 3 feet tall, and some were like giant infants. There were also some that looked sinister, like demon beasts. However, the strength of these 5 devils was around the 5th or 6th level of the Tribulation Transcendence realm. One of them was a tall and sturdy female demon, with 2 demon horns on her forehead and a pair of black azura wings on her back. She cupped her hands towards the purple-robed man on the throne and said, "Seventh Demon Lord, the great demon saint has ordered us to escort the 100 blood gods to the battlefield. In my opinion, the great demon saint wanted to test the power of the blood god spawns through actual combat, to see if their modifications were perfect. I don't recommend that you split them up. It's best to keep them together and form a special team. If this batch of blood god signs were truly perfect, their power would be limitless. This special team would also be invincible. They would tear apart the defensive line of the Luo Shui Divine Nation and charge straight into the Luo Shui Divine Nation. As the saying goes, pulling one part will trigger the whole situation. As long as we tear open a gap, we can gradually erode and disintegrate the entire defensive line. The Luo Shui Divine Kingdom will definitely be defeated." Beside the Shuro woman was a 3-foot-tall, purple-haired elder who looked like a dwarf. He waved the battle axe in his hands and said in a low voice, "Seventh Demon Lord, I don't agree with Inji's words. The goal of a unified operation is too clear and the risk is too great. If the Luo Shui Divine Nation concentrates their forces and dispatches a large number of experts to besiege the blood gods, we can't afford such a heavy loss. I suggest that the blood god spawns be split up and led by the 10 of us demon lords. It would be safer to fight in different areas." As soon as the dwarf elder finished speaking, a 3-foot-tall giant demon with a bloody mouth waved his claws to express his objection. Other than the 6 of us who have been in power for many years, the other 4 demon lords are all newly promoted. Not only are they weaker than us, but their ability to coordinate the battle also needs to be considered. It's their first time participating in a big battle, and you want them to lead 10 blood gods each? This is too hasty. Following that, the other 2 demon lords also spoke and expressed their different opinions. The 5 demon lords were divided into 2 factions, and no one could convince the other. The purple-robed man on the throne was silent. After a long time, he said, "Let's put this matter aside for now and discuss it when we arrive at the battlefield. Moreover, the second demon saint is overseeing the battlefield, and we still need to listen to his orders." Only then did the 5 demon lords stop talking about this matter. At this moment, Inji of the Shura clan said, "Seventh demon lord, we will reach the Broken Soul Cliff in another 300 miles. Should we take a detour?" Seventh demon lord waved his hand and said in a low and indifferent tone, "No need to take a detour to avoid wasting time. Although the Broken Soul Cliff is scary, it is just a rumor that is exaggerated. Raise the flying boat to a height of 3,000 feet and fly over the Broken Soul Cliff." Inji nodded and turned to walk to the center of the secret chamber. There was a huge disc array in the middle of the secret chamber, and it flickered with dark purple light and blood mist. The disc array carried more than 10 arrays, and it was the core that controlled the flying boat. Inji walked to the center of the disc array and waved her hand, sending a few dazzling purple lights into the disc array. Suddenly, a silver light screen appeared in the air in front of them. An image appeared on the light screen. There was a dark night sky, towering mountains and peaks, and layers of dense forests. This was the scene in front of them detected by the array, and it was 100 times clearer than the naked eye. Even a drop of dew in the dense forest could be seen clearly. Inji looked at the light screen with a solemn expression, waiting for the Broken Soul Cliff to come closer. Soon, 100 breaths passed. An incomparably towering peak appeared in the image. It was majestic, mysterious, and eerie. "We are here," Inji murmured silently. Her hands formed a seal, sending a few dark purple demonic energy into the disc array under her feet. Suddenly, the flying boat began to rise under her control, rapidly increasing in height. In just 2 breaths, the flying boat rose to a height of 3,000 feet, passed through the thick clouds, and was about to fly over the Broken Soul Cliff. But at this moment, Inji suddenly saw a hazy golden light in the clouds above the Broken Soul Cliff. Although the golden light was faintly discernible in the clouds, but through the light screen in front of her, Inji could clearly see a figure in the golden light. He was about 8 feet tall, wearing a white robe, and was a human youth. Seeing this scene, Inji's pupils suddenly shrank, and a murderous intent flashed at her eyes. She never thought that there would be someone who dared to block her way on this incomparably dangerous Broken Soul Cliff. If it was any other time, she would definitely use her ultimate skill to blast that white-robed youth into pieces. But it was different now. She weighed her options and decided to ignore that white-robed youth, and controlled the flying boat to speed up. However, something even more unexpected happened. Chapter 1944. Damn it! Inji's eyes widened in anger as a strong, killing intent surged in her heart. She couldn't help but curse. "Reckless human reptile! I didn't want to waste time, so I spared your life. I didn't expect you to take the initiative to ask for death. Since that's the case, I'll fulfill your wish. Go to hell." At the same time, she formed a seal with both hands and manipulated the disc array under her feet to activate the array to attack. Boom! The flying boat suddenly released a dazzling bloodlight that condensed into 3 huge light pillars that blasted towards the white-robed youth. The 3 blood-colored light pillars that were hundreds of meters long cut through the dark night sky and instantly drowned the white-robed youth's figure. There was no loud explosion, nor was there a tragic scene of flesh and blood splattering everywhere. The 3 light pillars flew out hundreds of miles before dissipating in the night sky. The sea of clouds in front of the flying boat became empty. Inji's lips curled into a disdainful sneer as she muttered, "Overconfident worm! What a mantis trying to stop a chariot!" However, just as her voice fell, the flying boat suddenly shook. Boom, boom, boom. In the night sky from all directions, powerful heaven and earth divine power surged and ruthlessly crushed the flying boat, making a series of dull sounds. The flying boat shook more and more violently. The outer hull of the boat was constantly caved in and cracks appeared. Even the mast and dark north flag at the bow of the boat were crushed inch by inch and scattered into pieces. The sudden upheaval made Inji full of shock. She tried her best to control the array to get the flying boat out of the predicament. The array spun at high speed as the flying boat burst out with all its power and lit up with a brilliant purple light. However, the formless energy from all directions was simply all-pervasive, so powerful that it was difficult to resist. The flying boat violently struggled for dozens of times, but still couldn't get out. Several demon monarchs in the secret chamber were alarmed and came to Inji's side to ask her what happened. Inji, what's going on? What happened? Could it be the broken soul cliff? Inji, didn't the 7 demon monarchs ask you to fly over the broken soul cliff? Everyone anxiously questioned her. She was also a loss as she shook her head and said, I also don't know what's going on. Earlier, I saw a white-robed young man in the sea of clouds ahead. Could it be that he's still alive? The 7 demon lords, whose aura was the coldest and most dignified, immediately understood. They said in a sinister tone, "Prepare to meet the enemy. We have been ambushed." Following his order, the demon lords no longer hesitated. They all turned and rushed out of the secret room, leaving the flying ship. Inji was the only one left in the secret chamber. She was trying her best to control the disc array to resist the boundless suppressive force. At the same time, the Blood God's clones and demon warriors were also awakened by the huge noise. Countless people opened the doors of their secret rooms and asked each other about the situation. The violent and bloodthirsty Blood God Scions were even more restless as they released monstrous killing intent. Inside the flying boat, it was a scene of panic. Swish! Swish! After several flashes of bloody light, the 7 demon monarchs appeared in the gloomy sky with 4 demon monarchs. The 5 experts were very vigilant. They spread out and surrounded the flying boat, taking out their Dharma treasures and weapons. Everyone endured the suppression of the invisible force and released their divine senses to explore the surrounding situation, looking for the culprit. However, what puzzled everyone was that the surrounding area was empty. There was not even a shadow of a ghost. The white-robed youth that Inji mentioned was also nowhere to be seen. Could it be that Inji saw wrongly? Yes. Which human worm dares to stop us? Are they tired of living? What a powerful force. It is everywhere. It is like the power of an array. This should be the power of the broken soul cliff. Legend has it that the bottom of the broken soul cliff is the abyss of death. Anyone who passes by here will be swallowed. The demon lords were all filled with doubt as they secretly discussed with each other. Only the 7 demon lords remained silent and calm. He looked at the broken soul cliff below and frowned as he looked around. He vaguely felt that Inji saw the white-robed youth. It was probably not an illusion. The invisible force suppressing the flying ship was probably related to the white-robed youth. If that is the case, the white-robed youth must be a powerful enemy with terrifying strength. However, why would he dare to stay at the broken soul cliff? How did he know that we would fly past here and set up an ambush here in advance? Is this a coincidence, or is there a conspiracy? The 7 demon lords frowned and pondered. The more he thought, the more alarmed he felt. However, before he could think carefully, there was a sudden change behind him. Kacha! Kacha! The flying ship's defensive power reached its limit and finally could not hold on. The purple light shield collapsed on the spot. The flying ship also suddenly shattered, making a loud noise. In just 2 short breaths, the huge flying ship was crushed into pieces and crumpled into a pile of scrap metal. Countless fragments burst out and scattered from the sky. The thousands of demon race warriors hidden in the flying ship and hundreds of blood gods' illusions also flew out. The powerful divine power of heaven and earth crushed many demon race warriors on the spot. Their corpses scattered in the night sky. The demon race warriors who were lucky enough not to die also could not escape this area. They joined forces to resist the suppressive force and tenaciously held on. However, their strength was too weak. More and more people died suddenly and were crushed into powder. Only those blood gods' illusions could still resist the suppressive force. They roared wildly in the night sky and did their best to resist. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Several rays of light flashed. Inji and the 4 demon lords flew out from the crowd and quickly met up with the 7 demon lords. The 10 demon monarchs gathered together and joined hands to cast a spell to form a light barrier that protected everyone. Everyone looked at the 7 demon lords and hurriedly asked, 7 demon lords, what do we do now? The flying ship has been destroyed. The warriors have no place to hide. Their lives are at stake. The 7 demon lords glanced at the crowd, not far away. Seeing the demon race warriors dying tragically, a look of determination flashed across his eyes. We don't know the whole story yet. We must immediately take the blood god's illusions and leave Broken Soul Cliff. As for those warriors, save as many as you can. Give up on those you can't. The demon lords were silent. Their expressions were filled with grief and indignation. However, they knew that the 7 demon lords' actions were understandable. After all, the blood god's illusions were the most precious and powerful killing weapons. The demon lords made up their minds and hurriedly scattered to save the blood god's illusions. Only the 7 demon lords, Inji, and the dwarf elder were left to support the defensive light shield. The demon lords moved quickly and saved batch after batch of blood god's illusions. They brought them back to the defensive light shield. At this moment, a giant sword as black as ink suddenly flew over from the night sky. Whoosh! When it got close to the defensive light shield, the mysterious giant sword released a dazzling golden light and an unstoppable power. Kaboom! With a dull explosion, the defensive light barrier formed by the combined efforts of the demon lords shattered on the spot. Chapter 1945. The 7 demon lords, Inji, and the rest were sent flying 10,000 feet away by the violent impact. Everyone was scattered in the night sky, and they were all either lightly or heavily injured. At the same time, the formless heaven and earth divine power suddenly doubled in strength. The demon lords' bodies were distorted from the suppression, and their flying speed became extremely slow. All of them were in a predicament. As for the 100-foot-long sword of burial of heaven, it was emitting a dazzling golden light as it wantonly slaughtered the demon warriors. Swoosh! 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 The gigantic sword slashed out a sword beam that blotted out the sky, slashing into the chaotic crowd. Bam! 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 Most of the demon warriors were only at the 2nd or 3rd level of the essence soul realm. In the demon tribes, or the 3 divine kingdoms, this kind of strength was indeed elite warriors. But they encountered the sword of burial of heaven, and only death awaited them. And those demon lords and blood gods could not even protect themselves, much less help them. The sword of burial of heaven went on a killing spree in the crowd. Blood splattered everywhere it passed, as though it had entered a no man's land, sweeping everything before it. 15 minutes later, the sword of burial of heaven slaughtered more than 600 demon warriors. There were also more than 300 demon warriors that were crushed to pulp by the formless force, dying on the spot. Countless pieces of flesh and purple demon blood splattered in the night sky, emitting a thick stench of blood. And at this moment, the 10 demon lords rallied and gathered together. They led more than 100 blood gods and tried their best to flee far away from Broken Soul Cliff. Seeing this, the sword of burial of heaven immediately gave chase, thrusting out sword beams to prevent the demon warriors from escaping. Ji Tianxing's cold bellow resounded in the world. Heaven and earth incarnation, dragon elephant subduing demons. Burial of heaven, lend me a hand and send these demons to hell. Without a doubt, Ji Tianxing had already heaven and earth incarnation, which was why he could maintain his formless state and support the dragon elephant heavenly seal that spanned 50 kilometers. He was the dragon elephant heavenly seal formation, and this formation was him. As he shouted coldly, he unleashed his full strength, raising the draconic elephant heavenly seal's power by 50%. It was to the extent that he didn't hesitate to absorb the spiritual energy within the heaven-mending pearl in order to increase the power of the great formation. The burial of heaven's sword also lit up with a golden light that soared into the sky. It merged with Ji Tianxing and increased the power of the formation. Shua. The golden light merged into the world and immediately disappeared. The 10 demon monarchs and the blood gods did not dare to relax at all. Instead, their hearts were in their throats. In the next moment, the invisible divine power of heaven and earth suddenly doubled in power. A gigantic golden light shield with a radius of 100 miles suddenly appeared in the night sky. This oval-shaped light shield was filled with mysterious patterns and lines, and the shadows of ancient divine beasts appeared one after another. The 10-mile-long divine dragon shadow and the mountain-sized divine elephant shadow appeared vividly in the light barrier, exuding an aura that could suppress the heavens and the earth. Such a dazzling and magical scene was simply like a miracle. This was the dragon elephant heavenly seal secret technique that Ji Tianxing had used himself as the carrier to cast. The 10 demon monarchs and the 100 blood gods were all enveloped by the formation. Their bodies were suppressed until they were deformed and could not move. As the golden light shield descended, the demon monarchs and the blood gods were also suppressed and fell down the breaking soul cliff. Soon, the demon monarchs and the blood gods fell into the depths of the breaking soul cliff and quickly approached the void net at the bottom of the cliff. The demon monarchs and the blood gods realized that something was wrong. They desperately struggled and roared. They did not know what Ji Tianxing wanted to do, but they knew that if they could not escape in time, they would definitely die. Therefore, the 10 demon monarchs rushed forward without thinking about their own safety and joined forces to cast a forbidden secret technique. Demonic dragon sky explosion. The 10 demon monarchs all burned, and bloody flames emerged from their bodies, connecting to form a blood-red demonic dragon that was dozens of feet long. Everyone's power gathered and suddenly exploded, blasting toward the golden light above their heads. Kaboom! A deep crater was created in the sacred golden light barrier, and a few cracks appeared on it. Seeing this, the 10 demon monarchs were energized and attacked the golden light shield again. Kaboom! Another shattering sound was heard. The pit expanded a little, and the cracks became denser. It looked like it was about to collapse. The 100 blood gods were also encouraged. They gathered together and formed a few giant demons that were thousands of feet tall. They joined forces to attack the golden light shield. The demon monarchs and the blood gods attacked the formation with all their might, which was equivalent to attacking Ji Tianxing. Cracks and craters appeared in the formation, and Ji Tianxing also felt waves of intense pain. He was incomparably furious. Damn it, there's so many demon monarchs and blood gods. It's too difficult for me to kill them all at once. I have to think of another way. He thought angrily and anxiously, and soon he had an idea. Apocalyptic tornado. The golden light formation within a radius of 100 miles immediately spun faster and rapidly shrank. In the blink of an eye, the golden light array turned into a huge vortex. Swish, swish, swish. The golden vortex within a 50-mile radius spun rapidly and released a dazzling golden light, illuminating the broken soul cliff. A terrifying, devouring power exploded from the vortex and crazily pulled the demon monarchs and blood gods. The giant demons formed by the blood gods' illusions were immediately crushed. One by one, the blood gods fell from the giant demons and involuntarily flew to the bottom of the vortex. The bottom of the golden vortex happened to be connected to the invisible void net. The first blood god was thrown out by the golden vortex and entered the invisible void net. Chi, chi, chi. With a faint sound, the blood god sun that was more than 10 meters tall was cut into pieces by the void net and disappeared without a trace. Then, the second blood god flew out of the golden vortex and rushed into the void net. Another chi, chi, chi sounded. This blood god was also cut into pieces by the void net and then swallowed by the void net. Following that, the blood god's illusions arrived one after another, and they were all thrown into the void net by Ji Tianxing. At first, the 10 demon monarchs and the blood gods didn't know what was going on. They just desperately resisted the power of the apocalyptic tornado. But after 100 breaths, more than 60 blood gods were swallowed by the void net. The remaining blood gods and the 10 demon monarchs finally realized that something was wrong and that there was something strange at the bottom of the cliff. Everyone was filled with fear and anger. They desperately fought back, tried to destroy the golden vortex, and escape the broken soul cliff. But it was futile. The golden vortex spun rapidly and unpredictably, and it could repair the cracks and gaps at any time. After 20 breaths, more than 30 surviving demon monarchs were all smashed into the void net. In the golden vortex, only 10 demon monarchs were still stubbornly resisting. Witnessing the death of 1,000 demon race warriors and the disappearance of 100 blood gods, they were in complete despair. Most importantly, they didn't even see the enemy's shadow and lost just like that. Chapter 1946. This batch of improved blood gods was the product of the ancestor Fiend Celestial's hard work and also the hope of North Underworld Mountain. They shouldered a heavy responsibility and carried an extraordinary meaning. It was the 10 demon monarchs' honor and pride to escort this batch of blood gods to the war. But now, before they could even reach the battlefield, the blood gods were all killed just as they reached the broken soul cliff. What was going on? Dying before they could even achieve victory? Who could bear this responsibility? Even if they could escape from the golden vortex and return to North Underworld Mountain, they would definitely be blasted into smithereens by the ancestor Fiend Celestial. No, the ancestor Fiend Celestial did not even need to do anything. The enraged great demon sage would kill them all to vent his anger. Thinking of this, the demon monarchs were filled with grief and despair. Everyone thought that since they were going to die anyway, they might as well fight to the death. Therefore, 3 demon monarchs burned their bodies and souls and self-detonated on the spot. Boom, boom, boom. 3 deafening explosions rang out in succession. The 3 demon monarchs all exploded, turning into bloody clouds that soared into the sky, blooming with dazzling bloody light. The power that could destroy heaven and earth was unleashed, indiscriminately sweeping across dozens of miles. Kaboom! The golden vortex could not withstand such terrifying power and was blasted into pieces. Countless shards of golden light scattered in the night sky and soon disappeared. Swoosh! The dragon elephant heavenly seal array was destroyed, and Ji Tianxing's figure appeared. His body was intact, but his internal organs and soul were severely injured. His face was as pale as paper, and blood was spurting out from his nose and mouth. Even the fluctuations of his soul had become extremely disordered, and his consciousness had become blurry and dizzy. At the same time, the other 7 demon monarchs were also enveloped by the bloody light and were sent flying in all directions. Their injuries were even worse. Their limbs were broken by the power of their companions' self-detonation, and their bodies were drenched in blood. The terrifying shockwave sent them flying in all directions, scattering in the abyss. 4 of the weaker demon monarchs were not only severely injured, but their souls and consciousness were also unconscious. The 7 demon monarchs, Inji and the dwarf elder, were stronger, and their injuries were lighter. Although they were also riddled with wounds and were in a terrible state, they were still able to maintain their consciousness. After being sent flying more than 10 miles away by the shockwave, the 3 of them stabilized themselves and tried their best to fly up the breaking soul cliff. Of course, their injuries were too severe, and they only had about 30% of their strength left. Their flying speed was also extremely slow. At the same time, a 10-meter-long pitch-black sword flew out from the night sky. It was the sword of burial of heaven. Swish! The burial of heaven shone with a resplendent golden light. Like a comet tearing through the night sky, it stabbed at the 4 demon lords at the bottom of the cliff. The 4 demon monarchs were still unconscious, drifting along with the blood-red waves of chi, bobbing up and down. Boom! Blood blossomed like a flower. The sword of burial of heaven pierced through a demon monarch and blasted it into smithereens. Even its soul was annihilated. Bang, bang! The sword of the burial of heaven turned around and flew to the other side, piercing through the bodies of 2 demon lords and exploding with 2 thuds. After the sword light pierced through, the bodies of the two demon monarchs also exploded into countless pieces of flesh and blood, scattering in the night sky. The last demon monarch fell rapidly from the night sky, smashing into the void net at the bottom of the cliff. The sword of the burial of heaven was about to pursue, but Ji Tianxing had already woken up. He waved his hand and shot out a sword light. Boom! With another thud, the sword light pierced through the demon monarch's body. That demon monarch was cleaved in two. Its corpse fell into the void net and was ground into smithereens. Seeing that Ji Tianxing was fine and that his injuries had already stabilized, the sword of the burial of heaven was no longer worried. Swish! It shone with a dazzling golden light, dragging a long golden tail of flame behind it as it flew up the cliff, chasing after the 7 demon monarchs and Ji's group. Ji Tianxing also regained his composure and rushed up like a stream of light. After 3 breaths, the sword of the burial of heaven caught up with the 7 demon monarchs. At this time, the 3 of them had already escaped from the cliff and were above the broken soul cliff. Before the 3 of them could breathe a sigh of relief, the sword of the burial of heaven attacked from behind, thrusting out a dozen giant golden swords. Swish, swish, swish. Suddenly, the dozen giant golden swords scattered and shrouded the 3 demon monarchs. The 3 of them did not know the secret of the sword of the burial of heaven. They thought that Ji Tianxing was controlling the sacred sword to release a sword technique to attack. Damn bastard. The North Underworld Mountain will never let you go. No matter who you are, the only outcome for going against the North Underworld Mountain is death. Even if we die here, the warriors of the North Underworld Mountain will avenge us. The 7 demon monarchs, Ji, and the dwarf elder all let out roars of grief and indignation. The 3 of them used all their strength and used their trump cards to launch a counterattack. The 7 demon monarchs took out a ghastly myriad demon's banner. He cast a spell to control the myriad demon's banner to release a purple light that wrapped around his body. Ji also took out a set of white bone armor that fit perfectly with her body. The dwarf elder swung his pair of battle axes with all his might and slashed at the giant golden swords. Bam, bam, bam. A deafening explosion resounded through the clouds. The giant golden swords shattered into pieces and scattered in the night sky. The sword of the burial of heaven's attack was neutralized by the 3 of them, just like that. The 7 demon monarchs' myriad demon's banner had a few holes in it, and there were a few more bloody holes on his body. Ji's white bone armor was shattered, and one of her left legs was chopped off. One of the dwarf elder's battle axes was chopped off, and the other one was full of holes. There was also a bowl-sized bloody hole in his chest. The 3 of them did not dare to continue fighting. They flew across the sky and fled towards the north. The sword of the burial of heaven did not hesitate and immediately chased after them. At this moment, Ji Tianxing also arrived at the scene. He reached out his right hand and grabbed the sword of the burial of heaven in his palm. He chased after the demon monarchs like a shooting star and stabbed with his sword. Piercing sword. A dot of cold light suddenly appeared, flashing in the night sky. In the next moment, the cold light flew across the night sky and stabbed into the dwarf elder's back before exploding. Boom! Cold light blossomed, like a huge mushroom cloud rising into the sky, illuminating the night sky within 100 miles. The dwarf elder was blown to smithereens, and his divine soul was also shattered. He died on the spot. The sword of the burial of heaven unleashed a devouring power and swallowed the fragments of the dwarf elder's divine soul. After taking care of the dwarf elder, Ji Tianxing chased after Ji. Big Dipper sword. Ji Tianxing shouted and stabbed with the sword of the burial of heaven. 7 dazzling cold lights were shot out. The 7 sword lights were as dazzling as 7 shooting stars and hit Ji in an instant. Bam, bam, bam. Ji followed in the dwarf elder's footsteps. Her body and divine soul were shattered into pieces and scattered in the night sky. The 7th demon monarch was the only one left. He was still running for his life and had already fled for more than 10 miles. Ji Tianxing chased after him with a cold face. When he was still 3,000 feet away, He waved his hand and shot out a 5-color light beam. 5-color divine thunder. This 100-foot-long divine thunder beam was formed by 4 types of divine thunder and the silver divine fire of the stars. It was extremely powerful. Boom! A loud, dull sound exploded in the night sky. The 7th demon monarch was also smashed into pieces.